I'm not sure if we could. If you want to, I could do it.
Shall we?
So this is streaming on Facebook or only Facebook or on others as well, on like other
YouTube
platforms?
as well.
Yeah,
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
we're live.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our Global Iftar 2021, brought to you by the Ramadan Tent Project. Global Iftar is the world's largest virtuous iftar. We began in London last night, and we're following the sun across the globe to the US, Australia, India, Qatar, and South Africa, Turkey, and then back to London again. So thank you so much for joining us today in Doha. My name is Farah, and I'll be your host for this evening. We have an exciting event planned today with Jamal El-Shayal. And before we get started, I would like to thank our media partner for this year, Islam Channel, and give a special welcome to those joining us today from Islam Channel's Facebook and YouTube. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I also want to thank the Arts Council UK, and their help has allowed us to continue our work this Ramadan, all of which is available on our website. Our work this Ramadan is supported by Islamic Relief, our charity partner, and you can check out the incredible work that Islamic Relief does at iruk.co/RTP. For those joining us for the first time, our events are interactive, so I'd love you, if you can, to hop on the Zoom, and for those who are comfortable, turn your cameras on so we can see you. And we'll begin with a quick run through of the tech. You'll find at the bottom of your screens or in the More section of your mobile a reactions option, so you can show us how you're feeling in real time. There's also a raise hand option as well if you want to ask our speaker any questions or add to the discussion. We'll unmute you. And also for those who are watching us on Islam Channel, you can log on, go to ramadantentproject.com and join us on the Zoom, and we'll get interactive with our fantastic speaker today. Before we start, we'll just see how everyone's going, and we've got Shabana, I think. Hi, Shabana. I'm not sure where you're calling from. Where are you calling from, Shabana?
I'm calling from London, dialed in. So yeah, enjoying the nice sunny weather here.
Nice bit of rain.
Yeah, in between the sunshine. But yeah, how are you? How's your Ramadan going?
Good, alhamdulillah. It's I've got a little bit of time off work now, so I'm really grateful that I'm going to be taking that time just to in the last few days do some contemplation, up the prayer, and have some reflection. So I'm really looking forward to that. And it's been, I don't know how you find it, but when you're working and maybe traveling and then juggling with Ramadan, it can be, alhamdulillah, full on.
It's definitely a testing time, but yeah, the last 10 days are definitely important, and I feel like it's just gone too quickly though. I wish we were just at the beginning again, but hopefully, inshallah, it'll be another Ramadan next year. So
I'm the same. This year's just gone faster than I think ever before. Previously, we've had, seeing each other at tents and interacting and seeing people in real life. And lockdown was slow last year, where this one's been a bit of a mix. And it's just, gosh, only 10 days left.
I know it's gone really quick, but I'm looking forward to being able to meet people in person for Iftar next year. So
yes, oh my God, that will be the best. In fact, going over to Jamal, how has it been in where you're based? Oh, we're just gonna.
Sorry, in Doha. Yeah, in Qatar, it's been yes, a second year of Ramadan under lockdown. We were actually hopeful that this year wouldn't be the case because they dealt with COVID pretty well first time round, in the sense that we entered 2020 with one of the lowest death rates in the world. When they did the lockdown last year, it was actually a proper lockdown, unlike some of the other countries where it was like kind of half. So they had shut down the airport, shut down everything. And then unfortunately, because they started easing the restrictions, as obviously it was very difficult to keep those restrictions on for so long. As they eased them in the beginning of the year, the numbers kind of shot up. So unfortunately, literally the week before Ramadan, they announced another lockdown because the second wave hit a bit later than it did in other countries. So it's been, unfortunately, no Taraweeh. I was really hoping this year that we'd be able to go back to the mosques. That wasn't a possibility. So that's one thing. But yani, alhamdulillah, we found ways of either doing these virtual events or there is still way there it's not 100% lockdown, so you can meet with a total of 5 vaccinated people, because they've been doing pretty well in terms of the vaccine. So you're allowed to meet 5 vaccinated people so long as it's outdoors. Problem is with the Gulf heat, it's not that easy either meeting outdoors, but it's all good, alhamdulillah.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like quite challenging in times. And what's the time in Doha right now? Because then we have Adhan in about 45 minutes at your end.
Roughly, yeah. So it's 5:20 now. So we start our fast at around 3:35, 3:36 a.m. and it goes on until 6:07, 6:08, something like that. So
And not long to go.
Yeah. Final stretches this year.
Fantastic. And what's for iftar this evening? So we always love to know what our guests are having for iftar.
That is a very good question. I can smell it somewhere in the distance, but I'm not quite sure, to be honest, because I came right from work into I had work in the studios today, and then I came right home and into the home office, and didn't pass by the production factory at the kitchen to see what they've been doing.
I'm sure it smells really good, though.
Yes.
And what are you having?
To be honest, at this part of the day, anything smells good.
That's true. Well, that's it, going to the supermarket, and when as you enter towards iftar time, everything looks absolutely delicious. I know if I go shopping just before iftar time. What do you have for suhoor in the hot weather to keep you going as well? It was very different.
So so usually it would be dates, yogurt, fruits, something like that has both kind of high in terms of glucose and stuff like that can keep you going, and water as well. To be honest, when we say hot weather, this is the thing, because it's hot if you're going to go out, but the reality is everything is air conditioned, right? So your cars are air conditioned, the offices are air conditioned, and so forth. So that does ease it. If anything, I mean, that stuff is, the heat sometimes is a better thing for you to go out and than the air conditioning. Thankfully, right now the temperatures, they've gone up. It's gone up to like late 30s, early 40s. However, there isn't any humidity, or the humidity hasn't kicked in. It's when the humidity kicks in that makes things a bit more unbearable. You feel like you're walking in a sauna of some sort. But yeah, it is
absolutely, it is challenging in the heat. It can be tough. I think Iman, you've had some Ramadans in hot weather. Is that correct?
Yeah, I spent quite a few Ramadans in Saudi, so I can relate in terms of the weather there. But it's like Jamal mentioned, everything's air conditioned, and usually people don't go out until after iftar. Like the whole schedule in Ramadan changes, the work hours, or they accommodate that for you during Ramadan. So yeah, it's a completely different experience. When I moved here, like spending Ramadan here, and it's like, yeah, it's just normal. You have to go to work, regular hours. There's no, later hours for work in Ramadan for you because you're fasting. No, you just have to, So that was like kind of a culture shock for me, for lack of a better word. But yeah, I mean, I do miss Ramadan back in the Middle East. It's a whole other experience.
It sounds absolutely amazing. I mean, I've done some Ramadan a few days in the Middle East, and it is, you're right, absolutely different, very different lifestyle, very different breakfast options. Whereas here, I feel as long as I have oats or cereal, I'll be good. Like, say, for the whole day, you need to just get those oats in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Are you the same? I'm sure your support has really changed as well since you moved to the UK.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Like, because I have some Egyptian background, so like sahur obviously has to have the fava beans. And like when I moved here, I'm like, okay, I have to get up and go to work. There's no work at a later hour. So like I found that having the usual sahur food would make me a lot more thirsty or dehydrated. So I had to find a way to like still feel full and not feel so dehydrated when I have to commute. We all know what commuting is like in London. So within the first couple of hours, you already feel like you're gonna knock out. But yeah, it was definitely a switch. You have to find a different food group in general to like sustain you during Ramadan.
As long as it keeps going, I can see Shabana laughing. I'm sure she absolutely agrees with that. It's like, yeah, get in the oats in some way, whether it's a milkshake or porridge or whatever. So I'm conscious of the time, and we have about 40 minutes left until Ramadan, and really eager to hear from Jamal. For those who are joining us, I'll tell you a little bit about Jamal Al-Shayal. He's an award-winning journalist and media personality. He's a senior correspondent for Al Jazeera English and has worked across many war zones. Jamal has a strong background in international relations and crisis management. He's a policy consultant and strategist with over a decade of experience of working with leading governmental and non-governmental organizations in Europe and the MENA regions. So over to you, Jamal.
Thank you very much, Farah, for that kind introduction, and everyone who's joining us. It's good to participate in this event for the second year. We're talking about, what people have for iftar and the kind of different challenges that exist, obviously, with each one of them. And I think one of the interesting things Iman was saying, here in the Middle East, they do try and adapt working hours and stuff like that to make, when it comes for fasting. But the reality is that, firstly, that's not necessarily something that's needed, right? You get the point of fasting is to challenge yourself, is to push, is to feel maybe what how lucky you are throughout, and also to kind of renew the discipline that comes with Islam, in the sense that it's meant to help discipline your soul and your personality and so forth. And it's funny because we say, sometimes working hours change in the morning to the evening and so forth, but in many instances working hours just stop, right? People just stop working in Ramadan. This part of the world, they're like, whatever, they take it as an excuse to just not be productive. But that's the kind of hashtag first world problems. When you look at other areas in this part of the world, people don't have that, right? They don't have that luxury to be able to stop working. In fact, aside from those who Ramadan for them is 365 days a year, in the sense that the challenges of maybe just having one meal a day, if that, to the difficulties of longer days, to the difficulties of working whilst hungry, to all of these things. So I think it's always a good time to reflect on that and to see kind of how fortunate we are.
That's very true. And you've yourself have been through many challenges as well during Ramadan. How have you said you've worked in many situations of conflict. Would you like to share with our audience your experience of those situations and how your faith has kept you going in those situations?
Sure. I mean, I think, there's a couple of times where I was covering war zones where it was actually Ramadan, right? So I remember the first time I did it during there's many deployments that you'd go on during Ramadan, and obviously as you'd be traveling, so you have the license to fast. I used to try and, as best I could, not take that license purely for the simple, not for any other reason aside from I would find it difficult to remember how many days I was traveling. So it was just more straightforward, and it's always easier for you to fast in when everyone else is fasting, rather than making it up a few months later where it's more difficult. And in some instances, particularly because we're reporting in English, if you're reporting in a war zone in the Middle East, sometimes you're looked upon because of the tension of the area as an outsider. So if you're seen drinking or eating whilst everyone else is fasting, maybe people don't understand that you're traveling and so forth. So it can either be offensive or could make it that much more difficult for you to win the trust of locals and so forth. So one such instance was in the summer of 2011. So this is 8 months of Arab Spring, the uprisings had happened and so forth. The rebels in Libya had marched on Tripoli to take it over. So this was in Ramadan, and they had done their final push in the second half of Ramadan, and we went to cover it there. So this is Tripoli. It was, scorching hot. it was August of 2011, if I remember correctly, and we flew from Al Jazeera's headquarters in Qatar. We flew to Tunisia, and then from Tunisia we drove across the border, across the western part of Libya to get to Tripoli. So the challenge was, we are out there. It's not only super hot and you're fasting, but also because it's a war zone, you've got to wear the flak jackets, the bulletproof vests, right? So these weigh about 15 kilos each. They're metal plates that you're wearing. So you're wearing them and you're wearing the helmet in the heat and fasting. It's a great recipe for dehydration and just to pass out, basically, in terms of how it was. So I remember that was from a physically challenging perspective. But the interesting thing was that when we got to Tripoli, there was no hotels there that you could book, because all the hotels that were there existed. Either the Gaddafi regime, particularly his son and his entourage of people, had been using it as their base because they were moving. Remember, NATO was bombing from the time and so forth. People were moving from place to place. Or there were some hotels that journalists were using, but they were the journalists who had been allowed in during the Gaddafi time. So they had already taken those places. Except one hotel, which was the Radisson Hotel. All the international journalists kind of converged on that hotel. And, there's like only a few hundred rooms there, tops, and there's like maybe 500 journalists trying to get in and so forth. The staff at the hotel, many of them had fled because this had been a war zone for the best part of that year. So what ended up happening the next day, by the time I drove in the evening. The next day we were fasting, was throughout the whole day. We get there for iftar time and we want to eat. Obviously, we're not quite sure what to eat or where we can eat. And the wives of some of the rebel fighters decided to set up a soup kitchen for the international journalists, essentially. So they set up, they had made this harira, a very famous North African soup. To be honest, I don't know whether it was because we were fasting, I was so tired, but it really was really tasty. I tried actually to go for a second plate, and then I got told off by one of the fighters with his machine gun. So I chose not to argue with him. But that was one of the interesting kind of experiences there, covering a war zone during Ramadan.
How do you, you do have the choice in those situations to not fast because you are traveling, you're not working. What aspects, what keeps you going in those situations? You're wearing a bulletproof vest, you're traveling.
So in that specific instance, to be honest, why I chose not to fast, purely, there's two reasons. One, because not fasting wasn't going to make much of a difference because there was no shops there anyway. So the best I could do would be drinking water. It's not like you could eat or so forth. But the second reason, because, like I say, this was Libya, it was essentially a civil war. There was a lot of suspicion. There was an Al Jazeera journalist who had unfortunately lost his life, who was killed a few months earlier. So trust is a very important thing amongst the locals to stay alive as a journalist during situations like this. So some people may not necessarily have the Islamic knowledge or awareness that somebody who is traveling doesn't need to fast, right? And so forth, or because they will hear us speaking in English to our security team who are with us and so forth. Already there's that kind of suspicion. So one of the reasons it's, yes, you've got to fight through it and fast, purely because it's safer for you in that situation, so that people understand that you're a Muslim, you're one of them, and so forth, to keep you safe. So that was more of it. But in terms of the faith and what that does, I think, again, if at the time I was younger, this is 10, 11 years ago, so I was, in my late 20s, I was 27 at the time, 26, 27 at the time, 27. Anyway, you have that help, you have the ability to do it. I feel like if I'm able to and do it. Where I think faith plays a role was, if you allow me, I'll relay another story when we were covering something during Ramadan, which was in 2014. there was the push against ISIS in Mosul, right? So ISIS had taken already several areas, and now there was a push by some of the Peshmerga forces in northern Iraq, international coalition, and so forth. What I was covering there was more the humanitarian fallout. So there was a huge flow of refugees who had come to these refugee camps that were now set up around Erbil in northern Iraq. Again, it's Ramadan time, and a lot of these refugees are coming there waiting for handouts, or they're waiting for the charities there, or the UN or other bodies to be able to provide for them. You're not going to go there and start eating anyway, even if it wasn't Ramadan, in the midst of these things, and it helps again to put perception. And I think from a when you're asking about how faith helps, when you look at a lot of these situations, and you'll see children that look like either your own children or your nieces and nephews, and any relatable faces of it, it really does. At least when I speak with some of my colleagues, and everyone deals with the stress or trauma that they see or witness in a different way. For me, I think the concept of rida, right, of being content with what God has given you, but more than content, being grateful for what God has given you, is something that helps kind of center me in situations post this. So when you're there, you see what's happening, you see what people are suffering through, and you remember that, okay, this is only a week deployment or 2-week deployment. I'm going back home to Doha or to London or to anywhere else, right? For these, this is their day in, day out life. And therefore, yes, Ramadan for us is a nice month that will remind us of things. However, these situations and what we witness are also things that will remind us how we should be grateful throughout.
It's that's very touching, and you're right. It's almost just sort of seeing what other people don't have does remind you of what you do have. And in these situations, when you have been in situations of conflict, just one more question on this one: how do you feel Ramadan impacts conflict in the Middle East? Do you think it brings communities together, or is there like more peace during those times? Are people actively reflecting, or are they not taking that into consideration at all, because we're talking about countries where there is a strong Muslim base?
I think it's important to look at the history of Ramadan, right? So Ramadan, prior to the revelation to the Prophet ﷺ, Ramadan was a special month for the Arabs anyway, right? So we're talking about for hundreds and hundreds of years, Ramadan has always had its place in society. Some of my, so I'm originally from Egypt, some of my Coptic Christian friends look forward to Ramadan. I wouldn't say in the same way that we look forward to it as Muslims, but it does have a role in them. Culturally, it's there. It's a special month, whether that's manifested through the special food that comes out, or whether it's manifested through the TV drama series that goes there, or whether it's manifested through the spiritual retreats that Muslims will have, or the kind of religious aspect of it. It's there. Coming to, let's say, taking off my journalist hat now and looking at some of the work that I do in terms of consultancy and whatnot, definitely I've seen conflict. Well, there's two ways of looking at it. When I was talking to you about the Libya experience, for example, Libya, that was middle of it was a war. It was a civil war, essentially. And they decided to launch a battle in Ramadan. But the idea for them and what spurred them on was that it was an uprising against an oppressive dictator. And therefore, the spirit of Ramadan is what galvanized people to push for the capture or the liberation of the capital, right? So it can have that impact. But it can also have an impact where you look to see specific conflict resolutions being the time being used for that. So, for example, we're talking now. I'm in Doha. There is a push to try and reignite the Afghan peace talks. There is delegations from Pakistan, Turkey, Russia here to meet with the Taliban delegation here to try and get that. So it has often been used as a time to try and maybe use that reflection in it to diffuse situations and so forth. On a cultural level, let's say on a popular level, it is definitely something that brings people together, you know, whether it's through obviously now we're in COVID, but whether it's through the simple act of communal iftars or taraweeh that takes place, or in Qatar they have something which is very similar to this. They have it. It's a unique Khaliji thing. So they have it in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other places, which is very similar to trick or treat in Halloween, right? To mark the middle of Ramadan, they have something called they call it Garangao, where the kids go out and essentially they sing Ramadan songs in front of your doorstep, and you give them sweets, right? So it's mainly treat or treats. There's no trick involved, but you know, so there are a lot of those things that do bring people together, and it definitely, that communal aspect of it is something that's underpinned throughout.
It sounds very different to Ramadan in the UK, because you're saying you grew up in the UK, and
Yes.
How long have you been living in?
So I lived. I mean, I grew up. I stayed in the UK until I graduated. So you know, I was born in Scotland, and then we moved when I was 5 or 6, and then I stayed the rest of my life in London, and I left when I was 22, 23. It is different, and to be honest, I'm not sure which I prefer, because I did genuinely enjoy Ramadan in London. Obviously, my parents were there, my brothers and sisters, my siblings. That plays a role in it. But also, I remember university days, you know, the iftars that we would do, the money we'd collect at the prayer rooms to fund those iftars for the month, you know, getting them, trying to negotiate with different like chicken and chip shops to get us, you know, cheaper discounts for the people there. The Islam awareness events you do, the kind of open iftar events, you know, it was before, I mean, it wasn't called open iftar, but you do open iftars with other societies, with other student union bodies and so forth. So definitely that had its own flavor to it. And, you know, as Iman said, there was no such thing as like things pausing for Ramadan, you know. So my last Ramadan, I remember at university, it was just when the day was starting to get a bit longer. You guys will laugh now, but it was just, I think iftar was at 7:30, right? And that was like the longest it had ever been, for me at least, right? I grew up, when I first started fasting, you know, when I was early teens, iftar was at like 3:45 p.m. or 4 p.m., right? So December moving onwards. So that was the longest it had ever been, and it was a difficult one. So I remember that, and I remember how that, you know, how good it was, in terms of, despite the fact that it was long and it was difficult, you're there with your friends, with other people at university, and it was a different experience.
It does sort of, you're right, it does galvanize you, does keep you going when you have that. Everyone's in a similar situation, you've just got to get through it, or especially if it's around exam time or term time, it can be quite challenging. And actually really nicely leads us on to our next question, which is from Shabana. And Shabana asks, how did you get into journalism?
That's a good question, and I wish I knew the answer. It's an interesting one. I never studied journalism. It was never an interest. You know, even when I was a kid, I think I went from fireman to president, right? And everything else, and footballer and all those other ones, right? But journalist was never one of those. And you know, as I grew up, my main inclination was to go into law. And then in my A levels, I changed that, and I thought I wanted to study history. I was always fond of history. My grandfather, Allah yarhamu, was a historian. My father, Allah yarhamu, was also a historian. So for me, history was always something at home, and it was something I was interested in. My sister, I have a sister who is a year and a bit older than me, and many years wiser. She studied history. So academically, she was a year older than me. She was studying history at King's. And I got my A-level results, and I had applied to go to King's. I had an offer to go to King's. And she said to me, I hope you're ready for the 1,500-word essay that you've got to do every week. So, which I thought she was pranking. I thought she was joking. And I said, yeah, of course, yeah. She said, no, seriously. I said, are you joking? She said, yeah. So at which point I said, well, I know myself, there's no way I'm writing 1,500 words a week, you know? So I turned down the offer and I started looking for something else to do. And I figured, well, you know, history is something that I have a passion for. I'll be reading it anyway. Let me look for something completely different. and I ended up studying economics at SOAS. But because I hadn't done any maths for my A-levels, I had to pick a language, so I did economics and Arabic at SOAS. So that was my degree, and I did that. And at university, and I hope my mother's not watching, although she knows this probably, I didn't really go to many lectures, in so much as I was a lot more involved in student activism. At the time, it was, post 9/11, there was the build up to the Iraq War, and then there was the 7/7 bombings. There was a lot more of that, It was the first time as a Muslim community we were getting actively involved through FOSIS, Federation of Student Islamic Societies, in the National Union of Students. So I was actually the first FOSIS candidate to be elected onto the NUS executive at the time. So that, and why this, you'll see the link now to the journalism, that then pushed me to be a lot more vocal in terms of when there was news reports about terrorism, about the Muslim community in the UK, extremism and so forth, I would often go and commentate on these issues. Subconsciously, or even consciously, I was very much aware of how reporting impacted my life. So whether it was my sisters who wear hijab being attacked in the streets, or whether it was me then later on applying for jobs and being unable to maybe secure them because of my name, or whether it was because of the comments that were being made and so forth, that there was a very clear for me trajectory between how my identity was being reported in the media and how that's impacted my everyday life. And I wanted to correct that and rectify that. But I was trying to rectify that through an advocacy perspective, through politics. So in 2006, I was a Labour Party candidate for the council elections for Uxbridge South. And that was all that's it. I had decided I'm going to go into politics, right? Then those elections I lost. And I was working at the time doing projects with the then Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, on the London stakeholders team and a few other things. That ended, that work. And I went on holiday to Egypt. While I was in Egypt, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who had moved to Doha, to Al Jazeera, to work there, and said, before that, actually in March of that year, I went to Al Jazeera. I went to give a talk in Doha. I was invited. Al Jazeera has an annual forum where they discuss global issues. So one of the things they were talking about was Arab and Muslim youth in the West. So I went to speak as an Arab and Muslim youth there. Then in the summer they said, oh, well, we're launching this English channel. How about you come? And I said, you guys joking? Like, I'm going to leave London, the most cosmopolitan city in the world. It's amazing. It's London. Nothing compares to it. And move to tiny Doha, right? Where there's like, and I was like, no, thank you, but no thanks. I said, no, just come. We're going to put you up here for a few days. Just let's have a discussion and then we'll see. So I figured, what? My holiday in Egypt had ended. I wasn't that keen on going back as much as I loved London. I think it was like raining every day during that summer. So I was like, what, let me just go and see what they want. So I came, they made me an offer. I was like, I'll think about it. Went back to London. It took me a few weeks and I was like, what, I'll just check it out. And I fully expected to come here for a year, 18 months, and that's it. And that was in September of 2006. So that is.
Stay there. Well, you're missing the rainy British summers, which are still a thing.
Yeah. No, I come back in the summer just to check in on them. Don't worry.
Then check in on the rain. We've got some interesting questions about your journalism and your career. And there's a couple of.
I have a former colleague, by the way, on here. I see Bilal Randiri from South Africa, but he stuck true to his targets because he only did a couple of years and then he fled.
To South Africa or to London?
I think now Bilal, you're in Norway, I believe. I follow.
Oh gosh.
I think.
Finland, actually.
Finland, sorry.
Oh, Finland, Salam Bilal. So I guess it's very different Ramadan there, right? Right.
Salams, yes. It's quite different. We have extremely early sunrise and extremely late sunset. But
I was going to say, does the sun actually set there this time of year?
So at the moment, it actually does set. It sets around, I think it's about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, which is not too late. But as it gets deeper into summer, then there's well, certainly places in the country where the sun doesn't set at all. And there's different communities. The community that we've connected with have, I mean, I wouldn't say they're the local community. It's what was, from what I understand, a Tatar community that settled here a long time ago, like way before World War I, apparently. And they follow Makkah time. So I guess for the newer communities like Somali or Pakistani communities that have settled more recently, the mosques there still follow sunrise and sunset, like actual sunrise and sunset. Yeah, but sorry.
That's okay. Like you've said, Jamal, a very, very different flavour of Ramadan. And we've got some questions for you. And then one question before we get on to the other questions is, you spoke about, your sisters and, you said they wore hijab and they also experienced difficulties in after 9/11 and 7/7, which for Muslims was a very difficult time for us all. But when it comes to Doha, a conversation that we have been having during this Ramadan is, how easy is it for them to pray, or prayer spaces for women in Doha, and access for female Muslims in Doha to prayer spaces? Is that a thing? Because
I'll tell you, it's comparative to the rest of the Muslim world that I've traveled extensively through. Qatar is actually very, very good with regards to this. So whether it's in the malls or whether it's the masajid themselves, there is always plenty of space. So and it's also very accessible, not just in terms of gender, but also in terms of abilities. So I know when my mother comes sometimes and stays with me, she's in her 70s. It's always been easy to kind of like drive up to the main mosques and have a very accessible entrance to that. And they're good. One of the best things, actually, there's a new city that they've been building called Lusail, right? This is where the World Cup final stadium is going to be. It's meant to house 200,000 people there and stuff. It has a waterfront walk on it. And what they've done is they've installed these rollout carpets or rugs, right? They're just there every however many 100 meters. So it's for you to, if you want to pray, you roll out the rug, you pray on it, and it rolls back. So it's like a essential open air prayer facility there. And some of them have like hedges around them for those who want to pray a bit more kind of privacy on it or whatnot. But they're just so in terms of accessibility, in terms of prayer spaces, it's one of the best things, to be honest. I know, for example, when I do go back to see my family in London, if you're out and you want to pray before the time's over, sometimes you've got to go into like a changing room in a mall or like find somewhere or whatever, right? Here, you'll be hard not to find a place you can pray, as in an actual prayer room or a thing. But even if you don't, no one's going to blink twice and look at you wherever you pray, whether it's in the airport before you leave or whether it's in the middle of a petrol station, if whatever it is. And that's actually been the case more so recently, because they only open the mosques because of COVID for prayer times, and there's a limited capacity, and then they shut them, right? So sometimes you're not going to make that jama'ah, or you're in the middle of something, so you'll just everyone's got their own prayer rag as well anyway in their car now because of the whole situation. So you'll find people just pulling up on the side of the road, coming out, praying, and so forth.
Fantastic, and it's great, that situation for women as well. I often find, airports are generally very good in my experience. I always find a good prayer space at the airport.
On the point of women, actually, I'll tell you as well. We have so obviously the current ruler of Qatar, the Emir, his mother, Sheikha Moza, is who is the wife of obviously the former ruler, has a very prominent role in society as well, right? So she was one of the people who set up Qatar Foundation, which has a lot of different educational institutions in it and so forth, but it has a great mosque, this modern mosque, right? That people either love it or hate it because it's very futuristic the way it's done, right? So more traditionalist people would rather something that's a lot more thing, but there's no doubt that it's a very appealing mosque, right, or interesting. And often in one of the things where obviously we haven't gone to Taraweeh now for this year and past, but she would come and pray Taraweeh. So you would see her or some of the other female figures or public figures. So that's always been something as well that I think has encouraged the institutions to ensure that there were spaces for women to just as there is obviously for men here.
Oh wow, that's absolutely fantastic and really useful to know. That actually moves on nicely to our next question. So Iman was asking, which links to what you've said, being in journalism for so long, how do you deal with the narrative of Muslims around the world more often than not being negative? We live in a world now where there is such distrust towards the media. How do you navigate it? Because they say it's easy to be a Muslim in a country where there are Muslims, but generally, how do you find that?
True. That's true. It definitely is true. However, to be fair, from a journalistic perspective, when you go into a newsroom, especially an international newsroom, it's often the case, and Al Jazeera is no different, that you're still in the minority, right? So in the end of the day, Al Jazeera is not a Muslim media network, right? It may be owned by a Muslim majority country. However, it's not a religiously oriented. It's an international news network. So when you walk into that newsroom, more often than not, you are the minority, and more often than not, you are combating a narrative. I remember, for example, having a very heated discussion with one of my seniors back during when ISIS first came, and where there's issues where it really, you sometimes it's just very frustrating. So there's the flag that ISIS wanted to use is a black flag, and it's the flag that has the seal of the Prophet, right? For me, that is not that is not the ISIS flag. It is the seal of the Prophet. The same way that the Union Jack is not the BNP flag, right? Or the US flag is not the KKK flag, and so forth, right? Just because somebody uses it, it doesn't mean that it's theirs. And in fact, lazy journalism by calling it that is what allows them to misappropriate it, okay? So I remember there was a report that I was taking over somebody else's, one of the journalists had done an overnight version of an event where ISIS had taken over some area and they had planted the flag there. And I was meant to update that report the next day. And the opening of the report was something along the lines of the ISIS flag firmly planted or hoisted or whatever, right? And I said, I'm not going to write that. I said, why? I said, because, and I explained it. I said, no, I think we should because people see it as that. I said, well, people see it as that because we tell them it's that. If you stop telling them it's that, then they're not going to see it as that, right? Mm. And it was a very thing. And for me, sometimes you have to take it. He's my senior. Ultimately, there is a what do you call it, structure or whatever you call it, hierarchy, right? But you have to then decide what sits best with you, right? Is it something you're ready to risk to be fair, I didn't think it would risk my career. I'm very well established that I knew, even though he's my senior, I could stand my ground, but for other people you could. So I decided it would mean at least that you're going to come in, you're going to clash with this person throughout the rest of your career, the worst case, best case scenario, and you decide when to take those situations. I think, so to answer the question, I think you need to be unapologetic, is my view, about what you believe in. Understand what you believe in, understand the nuances of it, be well equipped to fight your corner. But once you have those, don't take shit from anybody, is my view, and stand up for it if you believe in it. Because often the case is where the reason why we find ourselves where we find ourselves in, where we're misreported on or misrepresented and so forth, part of it is due to, let's say, ignorance. Part of it is due to a more let's say, those with bad, ill-intentioned agenda against us. But also part of it is due to us not standing up for ourselves, not reclaiming our own narrative, right? And that I think is something very important, that we do need to reclaim our narrative. We are the ones who should be setting it and talking about it, not in an arrogant way to say, oh, you don't understand, whatever. But no, there are certain things that, yes, we need to talk about. It's not right for us to allow people to take our own symbols, whether it is that, or whether it's hijab, or whether it's whatever it is, pick something, and for them to decide for us what it means. That this is a symbol, you know, where they say, oh, they don't look like he doesn't look like an extremist, he doesn't have a beard. Where's the logic in that, you know? When you let comments like that slide, or you don't challenge them, that is as much of a reason why we would find the kind of misrepresentation about Islam in the media, as is those who have, like I say, ill-intentioned or an anti-Muslim agenda.
Thank you. And that leads us on to maybe our last question. Because I understand it's your alarm is in 6 minutes until iftar for you. Would that be correct? So Hawazin asks, what advice would you give to yourself or your younger self at the start of your career? What would you say to yourself? What would you have given yourself?
We should have started with that question, because I don't think 6 minutes is enough. There's a lot of advice, I guess. I tell you, I was fortunate, alhamdulillah. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, right? And although maybe I don't express to my brothers and sisters a lot, but I'm fortunate enough to have grown up looking up to them and seeing their achievements, as well as sometimes their mistakes. It's good being young, because the elder ones get to do the mistakes and you learn from it, right? But you know, not just from that perspective. I think they achieved a lot and they did a lot, and I think that for me is something that's helped me. So I was blessed to be able to have advice at a younger age, not necessarily directly in that way, but at least practically seeing it. If there was a few things I would go back in time and say, one would be to not necessarily not to be in a rush. It's good to try and achieve quickly, but to kind of be aware of time in a different way, right? So when we're younger, you fall into, I would say, generally people fall into one of 2 categories. Either kind of people who just want to, achieve really quickly and finish and so forth, right? And either they will never perfect what they're doing, or sometimes they'll miss things on the way and so forth. Or those who are like super chilled and laid back and be like, yeah, whatever, I'm still young. And then the next thing they know it, they're like 50 years old, and like, those years have gone, right? Sorry, if anyone's 50 years old, that's still young. Don't take offense, it's all relative, but you know what I mean, right? So that's there's usually, we need to find a medium in that. You need to find a medium whereby you have the that incentive and the vigor to want to achieve and to want to change things, but in a kind of gradual way. And I think this, if you allow me, I'm not by no means a religious scholar by any means, but to take up on what I've learned from other people, is that this concept of being a middle way in Islam, and this concept of gradualism is central to everything. So when you look at the message of the Prophet ﷺ, it was all about gradualism. So whether it is through him receiving it after 40 years of his life, and then receiving it over a time span of over 20 years, or whether it is the edicts that came out. So whether we're looking at things that were slowly made not permissible, so whether it's alcohol and so forth, or whether it is things that were made mandatory in terms of the 5. You didn't wake up and suddenly have 5 pillars that you had to do, right? Everything was done in a gradual way, but there was always conviction. So that he had clarity as to what his message was, that you will submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you will do good, that you are here to take care of society and better it and elevate people. So there was always vigor. They would always fight for that. You would sacrifice for that. You would give your life for it. However, so that's the vigor element of it. But the gradualism, and this is what allows you to maintain stamina throughout. So what I found in my career is that sometimes there are some periods where I feel burnt out, right? Because I've pushed really hard. So I really wanted to go, I want to go and cover this story and that story and that story, and I'm traveling from here and here and here. But really, maybe it would have been better just to focus on 1 or 2 stories, get those done in a better way, but also learn from those experiences. So I think understanding time, and that's maybe the most difficult thing. I think that's a life lesson that everyone struggles with, is like how to value time as best as possible and how to utilize it as best as possible. And maybe that's also the one piece of advice that a younger version of me would have hated to hear the most. Whenever anybody used to speak to me about time, I'd be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, I'm going to be doing this. But in reality, they did know what they were talking about. We were just too young to appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have about a minute now left until Adhan. I just wanted to say another thank you once more again. Jamal, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been fantastic, engaging, very, very interesting. Thank you so much for taking your time to share, your insights and your experiences for us all. And I'm sure everyone who's still fasting, like myself, we're feeling a lot more invigorated as well after listening to your challenges and your stories. And I just want to say just a big thank you once more to our Islam channel, who's our media partner this year, and also to the Arts Council UK for making this event possible. You can read more about how we're fighting world hunger with Islamic relief at iiuk.co/RCP. And Ramadan is a month of charity and giving. So we'd like to encourage you to support the Ramadan Tent Project and help us to continue our work, because your support is vital to keeping events like these going as the world transitions to normality, and as well as our open iftars, our sunnah fast, and our other projects. And please check out the link in the chat box for more information. And you can donate to our online at launchfood.com/RTP 2021. So over to my colleague now for Azan. Thank you again.
Before you do the adhan, I just wanted to say salam alaikum to Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul. It seems I only ever say salam once a year on this open iftar with him. It's been a couple of years since we last met.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's nice just catching the tail end of you. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah.
And thank you for your inspiration.
Yalla, shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you once more for joining us today. We've just finished in Doha, so we're in Cape Town now. So big welcome. Thanks again to our Global Iftar 2021, which is brought to you by the Ramadan Tent Project. And Global Iftar is the world's largest virtual iftar. We began in London, and we've been following the sun across the globe to the US, Australia, Qatar, now in South Africa. And our next stops will be Turkey and then back to London again. And thank you so much for joining us today in Cape Town in South Africa. My name is Farah, and together with Adnan, who will be joining us shortly, we'll be your host for this evening. We have an exciting event planned for this evening with Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul. And before we get started, I'd like to first thank our media partner for this year's Islam channel and give a special welcome to those joining us from Islam channels, Facebook and YouTube. And it's a pleasure to have you with us today. I'd also like to thank the Arts Council UK, whose help has allowed us to continue our work this Ramadan. All of our work is available on our website, and our work this Ramadan is supported by Islamic Relief, who are our charity partner. And you can check out the work that Islamic Relief does at iruk.co/RTP. For those joining us for the first time, our events are interactive, and I'd like to encourage everyone to hop on the Zoom. And for those who are comfortable, do turn on your cameras. It'll be lovely to interact with you and see you all. And also, if you're joining from Islam channels, Facebook or YouTube, or our Facebook or YouTube, just jump on the Zoom at RamadanTentProject.com, and it's really, really easy to connect, and that will enable us to interact with you and for you to interact with our speaker as well today. So with a quick run through of the tech, you'll find at the bottom of your screens, there's a more section on your mobile, and there's a reactions option there, so you can show us how you're feeling in real time. There's also a raise hand option as well if you want to ask our speakers a question, or if you'd like to add to the discussion, and somebody from our back end will unmute you. So first of all, over to you, Adnan. How are you doing? Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Farah. How's everyone doing as well? I'm good. I was obviously trying to sign in as you do with Zoom, but it doesn't work, but we're here. Thank you for the introduction as well. Great to see you again. Great to see how the global iftar is really taking place at the moment, now in South Africa as well. So great to actually be here and see what's happening. Just run me through how has it been so far? How's the experience been? I want to hear from not only yourself, Farah, but also the audience as well, of how has the global iftar really been and the experience.
I think Iman's been doing a lot of the hard work, so I'm going to ask Iman to comment on that, because Iman has been a star keeping things running in the background. So
thanks, that's a very high praise. I feel like I've barely done anything. You guys are doing the heavy lifting, hosting and all that, but yeah, it's been great. It's such a rush actually, because we're doing it 24 hours, so we're all doing it in shifts, and then checking in with each other to see how the last session went. So it's really this sense of camaraderie that's amazing. We did it last year as well, so I don't know, it's just great, being in lockdown, but then still being connected like this. It's such a good feeling. Alhamdulillah, it's been good. How about yourself?
And how's your day been? How's your
Myself, I've just been back to back. I've just been looking at flat viewings, going around London, trying to find places to stay, all that sort of stuff. But I've been listening in to the Global Iftar, and obviously I think the team, Iman, it's not just a heavy lifting from one person. I think it's a teamwork for sure. And we can just see how Wazin and down at the bottom as well, who has just joined us, giving us a little wave. I'm going to unmute you as well and get you involved into the conversation.
Assalamu alaikum. Hi everyone.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm okay, and the Global Iftar is going well. We've got amazing speakers before, Yahya Ibrahim. It was really cool. Everything is on Facebook, of course. So if you've missed any of the talk, you can always watch them. It's great.
And I mean, just to quickly let the viewers at home know as well, we will be going into the talk in about 5 minutes time. So we'll do an introduction to the speaker. However, Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul is actually here, and I am keen to just get a quick word from him as well before we get into the actual talk. Assalamu alaikum, Ibrahim. I'm going to unmute you. There should be a button popping up now.
Can you hear us? You right? Yeah.
Yep.
I have to start, Ambassador Ibrahim. That's a fantastic shirt you're wearing there.
Well, I got it in
true African style.
Indonesia. Yeah. And it's the kind of shirt that Nelson Mandela made famous, because when he came out of prison, he wasn't comfortable in a suit, and he changed the entire dress code to what was now formal. I believe he even met your queen in a shirt like this. So I think he's restated the fashion thing, and he brought it all the way from the Indonesian slaves who were brought to Cape Town and who became the first Muslim community there. So that's where the shirt is.
What an introduction, I suppose. Sure.
That's fantastic. I didn't realize it come from Indonesian slaves, so you definitely enlightened us there. Thank you.
And the bookshelf at the back as well. I think that's the one that caught my eyes the most. I want to guess the number of books there are. I'm going to go with 350.
I'm not too sure. I've not done an inventory, but we, after years and decades of public service and moving to the US and moving into official residences, we've now moved into what we hope, inshallah, will be our last abode before the Akhirah. And for the first time, I've unpacked all my boxes with all my books. I've got them all in this whole place around me. And alhamdulillah, it is just a wonderful thing to have them here. So I don't know how many books there are. I'll do an inventory one day. I'm just glad that they are out, that they are at least categorized, but they are not the job of a true librarian. That has to come still.
So we're hoping in a few minutes time we'll hear more about some of your some of the knowledge you've gained from the books as well. Just before as well, we go into it, I'm a bit more keen to find out how things are in South Africa at the moment. We love these interactions. We love to be able to get involved with not only the audience, but speakers as well. And because it's a global iftar, we want to know what's happening in South Africa.
Look, I think that we all have very good memories of South Africa, the anti-apartheid struggle. Some of your parents may have been involved in boycotting some fruit and other products that came. And so we are very thankful to the world. And I think that South Africa has been going through a tough time in the last decade. Partially, it is by things done to us, like global recessions and all of those kind of things, but partially it's been self-inflicted. I think some of our leaders fell into the temptation of corruption and some of those kind of things. And so in true Ramadan spirit, it's a cleansing process in South Africa. We are hoping that this will be a Ramadan in which the most corrupt people will get out of office. They will be put in jail and put on trial, some of them. So I think we are living out Ramadan in that sense of the word, but the Muslim community is as strong as ever. The place is vibrant across the country with qiraat, with tarawih, with fasting, and charity, most importantly, looking after the poor in true South African Muslim spirit, reaching beyond ourselves. And so we have opportunities to feed Muslim poor, but we use the opportunities also to feed the poor in general. And South Africa, with a small minority of about just over 1 to 1.5 million Muslims, I think have a disproportionate presence of charities and philanthropies. Islamic Relief is one of the strongest ones here in South Africa, together with others from across the UK and across the world. So I think that there's a very vibrant Muslim community that is here in South Africa.
Great. I don't think I've actually been to South Africa, but now it's definitely creeping up on my list for sure. Inshallah. Sounds excellent. Just before we get into, I'm going to pass on to Farah in a minute to do the introduction. However, just before we go into that, for the audience at home as well, so South Africa at the moment is 1 hour ahead of UK. Therefore, the azan, I believe, is at 6:06. But just to confirm, is that the approximate right time for the azan?
Well, closer to 6:08, I think it is. But
6:08. Okay, inshallah, we'll try and aim to get the azan for 6:08 p.m.,
Yes.
which means we have about 40 minutes of a discussion period. We like to keep it as interactive and as open as you like, and also with some question and answer sections towards the end as well. So we can sort of play by ear as we go. But what we normally say is 20 minutes at the beginning for your section, and then sort of question and answers after that, if that's okay with you as well. Okay, so on to Farah.
Thank you so much, Adnan. First of all, Ambassador Rasul, Ibrahim, even, I just dropped you a message, so it'd be great to make sure that you're happy contributing to the chat and seeing the chat. So feel free to interact with us via the chat as well. For those who are joining us today from Islam Channel's Facebook and YouTube, and the Ramadan Tent Project Facebook and YouTube, jump on if you can, keep it interactive. Let's have, lots of your comments, lots of your questions. And I really can't wait to hear, what we're going to be hearing about today. So for those who are just joining us, Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul is a former distinguished scholar in residence at Georgetown University's Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service. He works in the Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim Christian Understanding, advancing an alternative paradigm to the inertia of orthodoxies in the face of extremisms. He's a founder of the World for All Foundation and his endeavors to create a world of coexistence that is safe for difference. And Ambassador Rasul has completed a term of service as South Africa's ambassador to the US. And he's previously also served as a member of parliament in South Africa's National Assembly and been a special advisor to the state president. And during his term as ambassador, he also received the award for lifetime commitment to human rights by shared interest in New York, and the inaugural Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Press Club in Washington. He's a founder of the World for All Foundation and is active in rethinking intellectual tools for cooperation and relations between faiths, cultures, and communities at a global level, as well as establishing dignity, inclusion, and equity for those marginalized and excluded. So today we are going to be speaking about, hearing a talk about Ramadan and the soft power of Islam. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Farah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have reached yet another month of Ramadan. I must say that I say this with a lot more meaning nowadays, because COVID-19 has shown just how vulnerable we are. And the fact that reaching Ramadan was not something that you could take for granted. And I think that we are very fortunate that we are here, and therefore we must participate in Ramadan 2021 and the remainder of Ramadan with a greater consciousness because of the blessing that we have absolutely reached this month. I thought in my own reflections on Ramadan, what stands out for me over all of these years, 59 almost, minus maybe 9, 50 years of fasting consistently as much as possible. I think that each act of worship in Islam has a purpose. It has a compliance aspect to it. There are some things that you must just do. There are rules to it. There are ways in which to do it. But I think we often get lost in the compliance and the rules, and we lose the sense of purpose and meaning And that's why I thought maybe it would be quite interesting to adapt a chapter that I've done in a forthcoming book called The Soft Power of Islam, because I have the sense that Islam is known, if not feared, for its hard power, our ability to be brave, our invocations to jihad in the military sense of things, the fear that people feel when they see our symbols, the distance that people create, the laws that people try to make, travel bans and all of those kind of things. It says much about who those people are and their prejudices, their sense of discrimination, their Islamophobia. But it's also a challenge to us that maybe we have not communicated who we are, what Islam is, what the Quran says, what the example of the Prophet, on whom be peace, is truly in the world. And therefore we may have been responsible for hiding what is the true power of Islam. And that is the soft power of Islam. Hard power in Islam is exceptional. It's the resort that you take last. It is a defensive posture that you take, rather than the kind of everyday position that you take. I must say that there are Muslims who are so beholden to hard power that they may even compromise the soft power that Islam is known for. So Joseph Nye from Harvard, he said that some of the elements of soft power is the ability to be diplomatic, to put your best foot forward. It's about your culture, not your military. It's about your history, not your anger today. It's about your authentic narrative. It's about your values. And therefore, we need to find ways in which our values can speak for us rather than our emotions. And so Ramadan is now one of those global symbols. The whole world is aware of Ramadan, and they are aware of our sacrifices. But so we are admired for our ability to abstain from food and drink and all the things which are normally normal for us. But are we communicating a narrative of what Ramadan is? And so I thought, how does Ramadan evoke and promote what I call the 7 coordinates of soft power? And so, of course, and I'll rattle through this and we can talk about it. The first coordinate of soft power in Islam is Tawheed, the unity of Allah. That's the fountainhead of everything we think, everything we do, everything we exude. And at the core of it is unity and integration, the unity of God and the unity of creation. And therefore, there should be integrity and balance. And Ramadan teaches us how to reintegrate ourselves, how to remove our desires, our egos, how to put ourselves at the service of Allah. But most importantly, Ramadan reestablishes our vertical connection as individual human beings to our Creator, but at the same time, our horizontal connection to other human beings and other creation. And that really is the first coordinate that I think we must cultivate in this month of Ramadan. Service to Allah, worship of Allah, and service to creation. The second coordinate is justice. Justice is our lodestar, our guiding light in a troubled world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that had Allah not checked one people against another, the world would surely have fallen into disorder. So justice is those unfortunate things we have to do because there is a threat to the world. And Ramadan teaches us the solidarity with those who are in trouble, those who are oppressed, those who are facing the brunt of injustice. And sometimes we are focused correctly on the injustices against the Palestinians, increasingly we're including the Rohingya, the Uyghur Muslims, the minority Muslims who face Islamophobia. But I think justice must be for all people. Wherever people face this injustice, they must see the way in which Islam responds, because that's part of our soft power, the empathy with those who face injustice. The third one that I want, the third lodestar of our soft power is mercy and compassion. That's the glue that binds us. Allah tells us that Allah's mercy precedes Allah's anger. Allah encourages us in this month of Ramadan to seek Allah's mercy and to seek Allah's forgiveness. The very important thing that I want to say is we often seek Allah's forgiveness and Allah's mercy, but we are very reluctant to give it to others, to share that same mercy that we seek from Allah, to share it with others. That same forgiveness that we want Allah to do, we don't easily forgive those who may have trespassed against us. And so this is a month in which the vertical mercy and forgiveness is sought, but at the same time, it is the month in which mercy and forgiveness must permeate horizontally as well. And Ramadan is all about seeking and giving mercy and forgiveness. The fourth coordinate I want to touch on is peace. Peace is the ecosystem in which the Islamic civilization flourishes. When there is war, society is reduced to one or two dimensions: a bureaucracy that collects resources and a military that fights. But when you have peace, you add your intellect. The whole civilization comes to bear. You add your literature. You add the beauty of your religion, your poetry. You add your art. You add your whole heritage. You bring that because it now has space, because nothing is only at the service of your hard power. Now your soft power can exude, and that is when the Islamic civilization flourishes. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that on that elusive night of Laylatul Qadr, Salamun qawlan min Rabbir Rahim, peace descends from your Lord who is forgiving and merciful. Your Lord descends peace to you. And therefore, we must not only seek and receive that peace, we must also make that peace. This is the opportunity for us to exhort the Afghans to find a durable peace, to the Sudanese to find a durable and sustaining peace. Wherever people are at war, how do we make peace? And that's what Ramadan must do, that as those last 10 nights, peace descends on us from the heavens, we've got to exude it horizontally. The fifth coordinate of our soft power is where we are positioned, wasatiyah, in the perfect middle, not moderate, in the middle. Rejecting the extremes, because the Prophet ﷺ has said, beware of being extreme in your religion, because people before you have perished as a result of their extremism. And therefore, we mustn't even be extreme in our fasting, because Allah wants ease for us. Allah gives us so many alternatives. If fasting is too hard for those who are old, if you are sick, you can't fast. If you are too young, fast as much as what you can. Allah does not want us to make extreme shows in fasting, in worship, let alone in life. We must always position ourselves in the middle, and Ramadan pulls us to that middle because it's a great leveler. The sixth coordinate, which is so fundamental in the month of Ramadan, is the coordinate of knowledge. In this month, the first revelation that came down is Iqra, read. And often we stop reading the verse when we say Iqra. Which other religion has in its first revelation the entire exegesis of reading? And then it goes on, Allama bil qalam. Allah has taught you the use of the pen. So it's not just Iqra. It is the use of the qalam, the pen. You must also write what you know. Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. Allah teaches us that which we don't know yet. And therefore, that's the third element of knowledge, to be able to research, to uncover new knowledge that is still only with Allah. Which other religion has made that? That's why the Islamic civilization needs peace, in order that we can read, we can write, we can research, in order to build this magnificent civilization. And once we've done that, we come to the seventh coordinate. It is of human coexistence. Because we do not stay in the middle for ourselves. We do not develop knowledge for ourselves. We don't want peace only for ourselves. We don't want mercy only for ourselves. We don't fight for justice only for ourselves. We don't believe in Tawheed as only our property. We want to integrate the world into one big humanity. And therefore coexistence becomes absolutely crucial, because it's in the interactions with others that the Islamic civilization not only thrives, but picks up new knowledge. We revolutionized maths, not because we had all the answers, but because we found the zero in India. We revolutionized knowledge, not because we had everything, but we were able to bring the printing press or ink from China to the West, and they established all of these. We revolutionized because of interactions with everyone else. The moment we started cutting ourselves off, our knowledge production ended. Our civilization became states and countries rather than civilizations. And that is really what I want to say in this month of Ramadan, that it is an opportunity for us to rededicate ourselves to the soft power of Islam, and that every aspect of Ramadan is a re-emphasis on the importance of that soft power. Hard power has a place in Islam, but only as a last resort, only when you've got to defend yourself, only when there's justice to be sought for. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this ummah thrive again on the basis of this foundation of soft power, with the ability to be brave when we need to be brave in the cause of justice. And in seeking justice, we don't do any injustice through swerving towards the extremes. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibrahim Rasul. That's very in-depth actually, and a good list there as well. I wrote them down. Just for the audience anyway, I want to quickly backtrack and go and, if you can, give a bit of a, I guess, definition on soft power and soft Ramadan.
A definition of?
Can you provide a definition of soft power in this case, in terms of in Ramadan?
So, soft power is,
and maybe the hard power as well.
Yeah. So, if we look at the world today, there are nations which only work with hard power, and they enforce their military over people. They are able to blackmail you economically. You've got to enter the economic systems to be able to get what you want from them, otherwise you perish. And that's all the aspects of hard power. So if we understand, and they can enforce their will, they can invade your country, they can bomb you, as the Muslim world have frequently seen hard power used against them. I think that on the contrary, soft power is really that your values precede your interests. Because when you only work on your interests, anything is fair game. Any weapon can be used. But when you have values that say you are essentially peaceful, that you are essentially merciful, your reach for hard power is more restrained. And therefore, your values must precede your interests. Secondly, your history, your deep history of civilization. You've got to show the world, for example, as Muslims, that today's technology would not be possible had Al-Khwarizmi not, for example, mastered the arts of algorithms, which is named after him. Because algorithms is the essence of today's technological revolution. and the fourth industrial revolution that is there. But very few people, everyone says algorithms, but no one derives from it al-Khwarizmi. The same thing, we speak about algebra today, but we don't know it is the name of a book, Al-Jabr wal-Qamar. It is the perfection and the completion of equations. And so you see, our soft power got lost as we try to toe it so often with the other purveyors of hard power. And so soft power is then that diplomacy, that negotiations, that dialogue that we have. It's our culture. Ramadan gives people a glimpse into who we are at our finest when we have the strength to abstain from 12 to 19 hours of any food and drink. It's amazing to people, but that is the culture that we are capable of. In the same way, our ability to communicate. No one communicates or listens to you when they are scared of you. You've got to relax the atmosphere. You've got to be able to create the ability to speak and be heard, to listen and to let others speak, to debate your way through trouble, not shoot your way or threaten your way through hard questions. And so soft power is really that whole gamut of instruments. At the end of the day, the Islamic civilization is the purveyor of soft power. The empire has often been the purveyor because it's maintained by hard power, by the need to expand. And that's why we resist this idea that Islam spread by the sword, because everyone wants to reduce us to a power that is only hard. Whereas the truth of the matter is that you've got all these people across the world becoming Muslim and being Muslim because they have been attracted by the soft values of Islam.
I really like that last point. And thank you for the definition. I primarily asked because I wasn't too familiar with it. And if there was anyone else as well. But whilst you were explaining all that as well, I was speaking to Farah and she had a really big smile across her face because I believe she has experience with this before as well in her degree. I'm going to pass on to Farah for some more questions.
Thank you. It brings back a lot of memories, actually. I had to do I did a podcast with my university colleague on comparing soft power and power dynamics. And we had to choose two very unrelated things. So we actually chose to do an assessment comparing the two Disney films, Inside Out and Frozen, and the soft and hard power and how the different soft power theories related to that. So I remember the hard days of putting in the work into this podcast that we did. So that, yeah, really made me smile about this time 2 years ago. So you're so well traveled, as we can see by your fantastic collection of books and your wonderful stories. And I know that you've been based in the US also. So how was your experience of Ramadan and being a Muslim in the United States as an ambassador from South Africa to the United States, particularly, post 9/11, and if you were there post 9/11, and how did that change how did your expression of Islam change at all in the US compared to, a Muslim country or to South Africa? So I'd be intrigued to know.
I must say that the first shock in Ramadan, when you come from a southern hemisphere country like South Africa and you go to a northern hemisphere one like that, and you arrive there in the heart of summer, it's just the sheer number of hours you have to fast. I think suhoor at 3 in the morning and iftar at 9:30, sometimes 10 o'clock at night. It's a culture shock. My son had just become mature when we arrived in the US, and his first experiences were your kind of 19-hour fasts, and he's never looked back ever since. Everything else since we've arrived in South Africa is easy. So it's the sheer hours that I think really strikes you. I also think that it was also very difficult because we have a big culture of Taraweeh, but when Isha is only at about 11:30, you realize how every family has to fight to pass on the tradition, the culture, the worship to their children, because it's not going to work when you come out of Taraweeh at 1 in the morning or after midnight. So we've introduced in our family home Taraweeh, just so that our children were familiar with the concept of Taraweeh. But you also get an opportunity to induct them in your own way of thinking about Ramadan and so forth. So that's the other thing. I was fortunate because I was shielded by my position as ambassador from the day-to-day slights and hurts that Muslims often undergo in a place like the United States, even when President Obama is president, especially if there are some people who insist on calling him by his middle name, Hussein. But my wife and children were not always as fortunate. My wife has, because of the headscarf, has been told to go back to Iran. She's been photographed coming out of a library with books and all of those kind of things. And certainly, I think those who are less protected feel those everyday slights and hurts being Muslim. And it's more pronounced when you come from a country like South Africa, where Islam is not tolerated, but embraced, where Muslims are deeply rooted in the liberation struggle. And I keep on making this point, that everyone knows that Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years. Very few people know that in the cell right next to him was Ahmed Kathrada. Everyone knows that Oliver Tambo, the ANC president, was in exile for 30 years. Very few people know that with him was Dr. Yusuf Dadoo. Everyone knows about Steve Biko being tortured to death in apartheid prisons. Fewer people know that also tortured to death was Imam Abdullah Harun. And so that's how deeply Islam is rooted. Nelson Mandela tells the story when he was on Robben Island about how when he was feeling very depressed, he would seek out solace at a Muslim grave. And when he understood the history of Qadi Abdul Salam, who's buried on Robben Island, he realized that he was not the first prisoner on Robben Island, the first political prisoner on Robben Island, but that a Muslim, more than 300 years ago, had been the first political prisoner of Dutch colonialism. If you then begin to understand, you come from a country in which Islam is revered because we provided most of the first slaves in South Africa. We were the ones where Islamophobia was so bad that Islam was banned for almost 200 years. That we really were part and parcel, part of the salt of the earth. And then you go to a country where you are not accepted for who you are, where your religion is an issue. Then you begin to feel this sense of attack, and you've really got to battle your rage. And that's what Ramadan teaches us, the ability to control our rage. لَأَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. The things which are halal for us, we've got to control. The things which are not, we can control and say no to. And so in a sense, I think that it was strange coming into the US with that kind of atmosphere, but you begin to then use the fact that people are perplexed that South Africa sends a conscious Muslim to be its ambassador. And they come and they ask you, why? How did this work? And you begin to explain, and you can see the layers of prejudice falling from their eyes. And the most important lesson is that there is a way in which we must be intolerant of intolerance. But we can't be so intolerant that there's no engagement. You've got to make yourself known. You've got to turn Islamophobia around also person by person. You can do the big ideological number, but at the end of the day, you've got to turn Islamophobia around person by person, audience by audience, group by group. And that's, for example, in the introduction, that's, for example, one of the reasons that they inaugurated a Washington Press Club award that I received, because of the engagement and the turning around of people's prejudices.
I realized I was on mute. I want to expand on that point, and I suppose, can you share examples, tangible examples of that as well? How did you turn it around? What kind of things, what challenges were there in the way, and what key qualities did you have to impose as well, based on the 7 of the qualities you mentioned?
I think one of the ways was, for example, when Nelson Mandela died in 2013, then Vice President Biden and Secretary of State Kerry, they came to the South African embassy to say they want to do something in Washington in order to celebrate the life of Nelson Mandela because of his great importance. And we said, no, we'll do it. And they offered the Washington National Cathedral, which is really unprecedented. That's the cathedral which presidents are inaugurated and buried from. And they were going to give this honor to Nelson Mandela. And we sat down and I made it clear as ambassador that we are going to commemorate Nelson Mandela in the way that Nelson Mandela would want to be commemorated in South Africa, through an interfaith service, even though Mandela was a Methodist. Mm-hmm. And it's at that point that we really got Kirat to reverberate through the Washington National Cathedral. We got the South African priest to come. We got Jewish people to come in and really to show that kind of diversity. A few months later, after the cathedral itself was exposed to that kind of thing, and the pillars of the cathedral didn't collapse because the Quran was recited in the Washington National Cathedral, and Muslim prayers were said, they invited me to, for example, do the first Jumu'ah in the cathedral. And that in itself was educational, because we said to them, okay, where is a place in the cathedral where your iconography is not prominent? And so we found a place where there were no statues of Jesus or crosses or whatever the case may be. We looked at it and I said to them, oh, you have the arches like I've seen them in Andalusia, and they have 7 indents, and those are symbolic of the 7 heavens. And that became something educational for the Washington National Cathedral. And then the Jumu'ah itself that we did was absolutely crucial. And so it's really, we could have taken a hard line to say, no, there are crosses in here, we won't do it in your cathedral. But navigating it was more important than debating the issue of crosses in the vicinity. And it was really one of those things where sometimes soft power requires you to be soft as water in order for you to advance a cause that is more important, because the essence of coexistence is, as the Quran says, لِتَعَارَفُوا, that you come to know one another. And you can't know one another if you have too many preconditions. And so, last one, for example, people expected that a Muslim ambassador would require people to take their shoes off at the door. And I knew that that would be a barrier, but I designated the whole bottom part of the house as public space. There was no preconditions, no inhibitions in coming in. And sometimes we set up barriers by putting up those kind of things. I think if we all take, for example, Hanafi wudu, which doesn't break easily. It's more durable than Shafi would do. And our women would, for example, shake hands. It removes a barrier, because otherwise we confirm stereotypes in the minds of people that we are over-cloistering. Women are in the background, they've got no public role, etc. It may not be the case. The strongest woman may not shake hands, but that woman may be labeled as such. And so, in a sense, I think we must understand where are those barriers and how can we relax those barriers without fundamentally compromising Islam. And every opportunity for engagement we may have to take.
Maybe a perfect middle, some would say.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's a quick pause on this side, and I will pass on to Farah in a second as well. But I can see more and more people are joining slowly. So those that are joining, you can get involved with the conversation. As always, we can keep it interactive. You can also ask a question. There are the reactions button at the bottom that you can press to either raise your hand, and we can bring you on, or alternatively, if you don't want to ask live questions, then the chat function is the best place to just post the questions and we can read it out on your behalf as well. Yeah, I think that covers that. Farah.
Absolutely, Adnan. Really enjoying listening to you, Ambassador Ibrahim. Particularly, being intolerant of intolerance, it's so important to have a voice and also express your opinions, but also in a way that embraces the dignity of Islam as well, and the dignity of our values, which leads on very nicely to my next question. So you spoke about our values speaking for us, as opposed to our emotions, and how can we do this on a community level to raise the profile of Islam away from the negatives and more to the positives? So I'd value your opinions on that.
I think the one thing about values is that every community tries to make as if its values are unique to it. And so what you set up with such a discourse is a competition of values. Whereas if you go to the essence of a value, you may find that it is a human value. And so, for example, I refer to the Afghans, but in, for example, my interaction with the two sides in the Afghan conflict, the Afghanistanis in the Afghan conflict, we were able to show the correlation between the Maqasidu Sharia, the objectives and the values of Islam, and how they have touchstones in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the mediating teams themselves were surprised that they had seen Islam as bereft of values of rights, bereft of values relating to women and children. For them, we were just one mishmash of bad. But in unpacking that, they could see, but listen, we share these things. So the first thing about values is that there may be certain values, some values which may be exclusive, but there would be other values that are human. And the more we bring it to the level of human values, the more touchstones we find with ordinary other people. And so that's the first thing about values. The second one is on reaching with communities, we must often be careful about our passion. The question we must ask is, where is our passion coming from? Is it a good place or a bad place? So sometimes you can have a Muslim saying all the right things in the most passionate ways. Down with Zionism, for example. And the place could be justice, or the place could be anger. And if it's justice, then you have the ability to navigate a way in which to communicate with people so that they see the point of justice, They see your dignity. They see your reasonableness. They see how you are pointing out their injustice. Whereas if it were to come from a place of anger, they see your confusion between Zionism as an ideology and Judaism as a religion. Jews as fellow religionists and Jews as political perpetrators. You see, everything works on your ability to make distinctions all the time so that your intention, and that is why the fundamental principle in Islam is innamal a'malu binniyah. Every action starts with an intention. If your intention is not purified, your communication will not be pure. You will then wonder, why am I misunderstood? Because people are hearing your intention, even though your words may be the same words that you use. And so it's this art of communication, this authentic narrative that is germane and integral to soft power, has to start with a purified intention. You've got to struggle with yourself before you want to struggle with others. And that is why, for example, the story of Sayyidina Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, on the battlefield, about to kill his opponent in battle. The man spat in his face, after which, pondering, Sayyidina Ali withdraws his sword, and the man says, why did you do that? You're foolish. And Sayyidina Ali says, had I killed you before you spat in my face, it would have been for Allah. But after you spat in my face, it would have been because of my own sense of hurt. Now, if Sayyidina Ali, in the heat of battle, can have that clarity of intention, why do we make the mistakes that we make in communicating who we are, what's upsetting us, how we are striving for justice, and what it is that we want to be able to achieve? So I can go into more detail. So for example, in South Africa, we earned the trust of our fellow South Africans, because we understood that before the Prophet, on whom be peace, before he was Rasulullah, the messenger of God, he was Al-Amin, the trustworthy. We want to give a message, but not earn people's trust. And therefore, how we communicate, everything starts with trust building. If you are not trusted, you can come with the best of intentions, but you will always be mistrusted. And that is why our message will fall on barren soil, whereas trust fertilizes the soil on which our message and our actions come.
That's a very nice way of saying it. The trust, fertilize the soil of which our messages and actions come. And also, I really like, and this is something I believe strongly in, is that everything does work on your ability to make a distinction. Because at the end of the day, we're responsible for what we're saying and what we're doing, and our intentions, whether in our daily life or whether in our Islamic life, are so vital to the results and outcomes that, we'd like to have. I'm conscious of the time. I know we have 5 minutes until your adhan. And I think we've got time for one more question. So if you could briefly answer that as well. A theme that's been going on during our talks this Ramadan, particularly in the points of COVID as well, and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's caused us all to reflect on our actions and behaviours and values, as you said yourself. So one factor that a lot of conversations happened around that we hope will change, certainly for post-COVID, is how do you make Islam, one, more accessible, and to women as well, and how do you make it, how as Muslims can we live a life of sustainability? So I'd be intrigued in the last 3-4 minutes or 3 minutes to hear from you regarding that.
Farah, COVID has been one of those iconic moments that we are living through. It has had the ability to turn from business as usual to business unusual. The world has never been so affected, every individual being affected. Climate change, we're affected by it, but it is not direct. You don't have to wear a mask for climate change. You don't have to social distance for climate change. And so along comes COVID to dramatize the crisis of the world. And I've used the term often, COVID-19 has been a moment of rupture. Moments of rupture can either be a descent into the abyss, or it could be the prelude to rapture, something better and something joyful. And we've got to capture rapture out of rupture. And I think that this is a way in which our shared human fragility across the world can open up people's ability to regard us not as our stereotype, but as another fragile human being who come from fragile contexts like the war in Syria and the poverty in this and the genocide in Burma, etc., etc. So we have an opportunity to be human even before we are Muslim in the eyes of the world. And then they can see the Islam in us. I think COVID has the ability to remove the strongest tyrant like a Trump, to make vulnerable a populist like Modi, to shake up a Netanyahu, and to even make vulnerable a Bolsonaro. People who look very strong, suddenly they are feet of clay. And so in this gap in history, how do we insert ourselves? How do we insert who we are? Not just us, but the poor across the world. And most importantly, this moment shows not our vulnerability only, but our mutual dependence on each other. And therefore, Muslims must be prepared to do what the Prophet ﷺ endorsed. Enter into khilful fudul, the coalitions of virtue. How do we make common cause with other people that we don't even know about across the world, global coalitions for virtue? How do we make sure that we do that? I think if we do that, we represent ourselves to the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us today. Before I hand over to Adnan for the final close, I'd just like to say Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to be signing off now, so handing over to Adnan for our Turkey leg. So thank you everyone who's joined us so far today. Thank you, Ambassador Ibrahim. It's been a pleasure. And Adnan, over to you for the close.
Thank you, Farah. And again, from myself as well, thank you very much, Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul, for joining us to talk today as well. I've learned a lot. I'm sure Farah and Iman have as well as the audience at home. So in the final close, we have a minute left. Just a final few words from myself as well. The first and foremost bit is to thank all the people joining us today, everyone listening from home and joining in with conversations at home as well. Specifically, we want to thank the Islam Channel, our media partners today, for making this possible, and also the Arts Council UK as well. I know without their help make this possible. The Global Iftar Project definitely is something valuable and something specific that we're doing this year as well as last year. So it's really good to see that it's running smoothly as well. As Ramadan is a month of charity, we do encourage you to support Ramadan 10 Project by going online and donating towards the good cause on launchgood.com/RTP 2021. I think we've got a couple seconds left with the azan, so I will pause here for a bit of reflection. I hope all the brothers and sisters in South Africa at the moment can enjoy their fast. Sounds good for me.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. Now over here again. So we're going on to the next leg of the Global Iftar 2021 into Turkey now in Istanbul. Right, so those that have joined us before this, we were in South Africa. We're going to move the conversation onwards now whilst we go through the Global Iftar, which is the world's largest virtual iftar taking place. We started in London. And we followed across the globe to the United States, Australia, India, I think might have skipped out this time. However, we had Qatar, South Africa just before, and now we are in Turkey. And then we will go back to London a little bit later on today as well. So thank you for joining us from Turkey at the moment, and also, I suppose I can see some people, familiar faces from UK here as well. I'm Adnan. I will be your host today. And before we get into the details of the session today, I want to be able to thank our media partners. So we have two media partners today, Islam Channel and the UK Arts Council as well. I know without their work, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing at the moment, but also just all the support that we've been able to get from not only the global iftar, but also the virtual iftars we do every single year as well. You can support our cause by going on launchgood.com/RTP 2021. And we encourage this as well. And there's lots of other more features and information about the work that's involved within Ramadan Tent Project. Okay, so let's go through a little bit of housekeeping with Zoom. So those, I suppose most people might have used Zoom, but those that haven't, it's very simple. What we're going to do is basically have a reactions button at the moment at the bottom that you can use to interact with us on the screen. So if you do click the reactions button, you'll find a couple of options. The specific one is raise hands. You can use that to just raise your hand, ask any questions, or sort of come live on the screen. You can also use other emojis as well, such as clap, thumbs up, and even a heart as well if you're feeling that. So be simple to use. There is a chats function, and the chats function we heavily encourage everyone involved to communicate with us, raise any questions, have anything, any comments, and share their thoughts on anything else they want to do as well through that feature. In the chat function, you can choose specifically who you want to message. So if there's a question that you don't want to post to everyone in the audience, then you can specifically put it to my name, and I could raise that question for you as well. Right, I'm trying to think if I've forgotten anything. And as always, we want this to be interactive. So everyone that's joining us, if you can, open your cameras. This session is recorded, just bearing in mind. But I think we want this to be as interactive as possible. Right, so without further ado, I'm just gonna have a conversation. We're joined right now with Della Miles and Riyad Minty as well, and Shoaib Webb as well. I'm gonna unmute all three. Assalamu alaikum everyone, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me, you can see me loud and clear?
Yes, I can see you, I can hear you.
Great, great. And Riyad as well, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you and see you loud and clear.
Fine. And last but not least, Imam Shoaib, can you hear me and see me?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, this is going to be more of a conversation, and we've got three amazing guest speakers, so I suppose it's going to flow like water. Just for your information and for everyone else watching at home as well, let me run through the quick agenda so we're aligned to what to expect next. So in the UK, I guess the UK times are a few hours behind Turkey. However, we're going to have maybe a 5-minute introduction right now to everyone, and just a bit of general conversation around how Ramadan is going for yourself. And then after that, I think what we'll have is about a 20 to 25-minute session on each speaker about sort of yourself a bit more, and your work that you're doing, and also just general Ramadan reflections as well. So let's aim for about 5:30, let's say, so in about 10 minutes time. After that, we have about 35 minutes overall of question and answers, and just generate any more questions. And then Yazan is going to go off at 6:06 p.m., which is the UK time, so 3 hours later would be in Turkey. That's the agenda. So we have about sort of 35-40 minutes to basically get into the topic. Right, that being said, any questions at all so far? No? Perfect. Okay, so Della's giving me a shaky yes or no.
I mean, I'm very new at this. I'm like a baby in Islam, so I hope I can share something with someone. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. No, well, since you're doing well, first and foremost, so don't worry about that. But since I've got you on camera first, why don't we start off with you? A little bit of an introduction to yourself, a little bit of background for the audience, and just for everyone else as guest speakers here as well.
Okay, are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay, well, my name is Della Miles, and I'm from America, originally Houston, Texas, and I'm an artist, a singer. I started my career in Los Angeles. Years after Whitney Houston became Whitney Houston, after The Bodyguard, I was asked to work with her. So that is where my experience came from, with her and with Michael Jackson. And after working with such artists, I decided, I should try it on my own. And it's been a true blessing for me. I've traveled the world, and somehow I landed here in Turkey, which is amazing because this is where I was introduced to Islam. And I have to say, before coming here, of course, I heard of Islam, but had no real knowledge, or I have to say, even no interest, because there was no one around me, you know, who was practicing any Islamic values. So I had no idea about the religion. And so it's a blessing that I came here, and I've learned so much so far.
Great. Well, welcome to the show, and welcome to, I suppose, the new beginnings as well. So we'll come back. We'll come back for more shortly. Let me move to Riyad Minty next for a brief introduction. I'm going to unmute. Oh, okay, you've been unmuted.
All right.
Riyad.
All right. Walaikum salam. Thanks for having me. So it's difficult to follow, Sister Della. I was at an event after Ambassador Rasul. I'm also South African. So it's, you know, in a blessed company and with Imam Suhaibia, obviously. So it's an honor to be as a speaker with such esteemed people that's here. So a bit about myself. I'm South African, born in South Africa. I moved to Doha to join Al Jazeera, where I would join the new media team and kind of built a lot of was part of the team that built a lot of the digital strategy for Al Jazeera. I was there for a decade. I spent some time in San Francisco, where I was the founder of AJ Plus, which I guess is a brand that a lot of people know and follow on digital platforms. And AJ Plus became one of the largest, probably the largest media brand on social platforms shortly after it launched. And about 5 years ago, I took up the blessed opportunity to move to Istanbul. I had a good offer from TRT, which is the public broadcast of Turkey, where we were building a new news network, and decided to take the leap and try and help build something new that could be based out of Istanbul for the rest of the world. And I've been here for the last 5 years with my wife, where I think, as Della mentioned, I think Turkey or Istanbul is kind of the country that calls you to it. I think it's almost, there's something special about this place that it's difficult to put into words, but it just feels like such a blessing to be able to be living here and spend the last 5 years here and just sort of engaging with the culture and the people.
Great, amazing. Actually, I'm going to assume everyone is from Istanbul. We'll come back down to Imam Suhaib in a minute as well. I have been to Istanbul once, and when I did in 2014, I think at that point I told my mum, like, Mum, I'm ready to move here. This is the city I want to be in. Primarily because I think it was, you know, it was in Asia and Europe, and it had best of both worlds and the best of both weathers and basically everything, and the culture as well. We'll come back to that in a second as well. There is a lot of good stuff over here as well. I was doing a bit of profile reading on your side earlier. You might have seen me on LinkedIn as well. And I'm definitely interested to hear more about the journey of sort of leading the social media on the Al Jazeera Plus side as well, and what that really entailed, building something on that granular level as well. Okay, so last but not least, Imam Suhaib Webb, I'm going to unmute you and we'll have a quick introduction to yourself as well. I think you've been unmuted now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Suhaib, actually, Suhaib Webb.
Suhaib, apologies.
No, it's all right, it happens. I'm actually from Oklahoma City, so close to H-Town, close to Houston. And I am a professor, assistant adjunct professor at NYU in New York City.
Professor. And sorry, I didn't hear you say the professor of
Islamic Studies, Islamic Ethics and Law.
And is it correct that I read it earlier as well? You used to teach at Boston, was it?
I was an imam in Boston years ago.
Sorry, apologies. You were
worked at Harvard, but I wasn't a professor.
So you transitioned from Boston to New York. New York. That's, I mean, there's a big rivalry there. I don't know if I'm right about this, but I've heard about sort of Boston, New York, which was a better one, but we'll get into that.
Kind of like Bradford fried chicken versus Manchester fried chicken.
There's only one answer really. never Bradford, but we'll leave that out. Great to have you on the show, and great to sort of get the introductions in as well. This is a open discussion, like I mentioned earlier as well, and I want to be able to sort of go through lots of different areas and different experiences everyone's had so far. I'm keen to start sort of at the beginning, and as Della Miles mentioned as well, in terms of coming to the journey of religion and Islam, and what that was really like. And I suppose from my question, for myself, it's what was it? How did it happen? What enticed you, or what sort of stood out to you that made you feel actually this is something I want to explore more?
Are you speaking to Della?
I'm speaking to Della, yeah.
No, for me, religion is more than reading. It's more than putting the Bible or the Quran on the table so everyone can see it. It's more than praying 5 times a day. So what brought me into it was the action of the people, and so for me that was more important, the behavior and how it was shared to me, and how I saw other people in Islam take off their sweaters and coats just to clothe someone. So these kind of actions. And to feed the hungry, take someone to the grocery store and fill their refrigerator. These kind of things are the things that brought and caught my attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes for not only the Muslims right now as well, but for most of the people as well. The compassion you feel by those actions is definitely gonna, move any person.
Yes.
And was that as you came to Turkey, or was that sort of
No, that was in Turkey. I experienced so many beautiful things in Turkey. As I said before, I didn't know anything about Islam before coming to Turkey. And just from people that I know, their actions and their behavior is what caught my attention. And I wanted to know more.
And for the audience at home as well, I'm going to bring Riyadh Minty into this as well, because you're also from Istanbul. Can you describe what is it like in Ramadan at the moment? What are the sort of what are the streets like, or maybe it might be due to COVID, it might not be the same as normal, but what are these actions that you're talking about with people? What's the general atmosphere like? We really want to know.
I mean, I can talk about Istanbul. We actually under lockdown at the moment. Okay. So we just started a nationwide lockdown 2 days ago. It's a 3-week lockdown. So we are allowed to go out to buy groceries and bread and to the nearest masjid for your 5 salahs or any prayer place, but there's no Taraweeh prayers. So it's quite, it's a very different atmosphere. The masjids do dhikr on Friday nights from the loudspeakers and on Thursday nights, which is absolutely beautiful to be able to hear. But we are really missing that normal Ramadan spirit. So I've been here for 5 years, and sort of the pre-COVID Ramadan atmosphere is absolutely magical, where it's, you going out for your Taraweehs. Obviously it's long days, but people are having picnics for iftar out in the parks in front of the masjids. It's a very family oriented space. But this Ramadan, like last Ramadan, it's a lot more reflective. People are at homes and sort of your own family units and having a Ramadan. So I do know that a lot of people and a lot of my colleagues last Ramadan was a struggle, this Ramadan too, because a lot of people are locked up at home, and normally Ramadan is a time for people can go out and share and engage in spaces. So it's also important to kind of remember that. And I think if people have friends who are alone at home and under lockdown anywhere in the world, so maybe just give them a call, or, and just check in on them, because Ramadan can be quite lonely and isolating for a lot of people when you don't have that collaborative spirit that we may normally be used to.
Yeah, and that's a really good point raised actually, about being able to just drop in on anyone, drop in your friends, your family, just check in. It doesn't take long for anyone to sort of do that as well. Della Miles, how about yourself?
Well, I am actually in, are you speaking to me?
Yeah, I'm not sure Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah.
So I'm in Dalian, and so I live in a village, and I live in a huge garden when I have lots of chicks and ducks and animals around me. So, and mountains and the lake. And so it's quite refreshing. If you have to be on lockdown, I feel extremely blessed that, you know, that I am surrounded by the mountains and the water. And it's kind of like it's comforting for me. So because I am alone here, so it is comforting for me.
You've got to join us more and more on more virtual open iftars as well, because the essence of the virtual open iftar is exactly that, to be able to bring people together from all walks of and all areas of life as well. I just wanted to share a quick experience as well that, you know, in 2019 was when I first went to the Ramadan tent project, the actual tent that takes place in London. And it's an exceptional experience for anyone from all walks of life to be able to share not only just food, but I think, you know, come together and share experiences. So I went to this, I loved it, enjoyed it, saw the whole vibe, and I thought, actually, I want to get involved and actually be part of this experience too. So COVID did happen a year after. However, putting something virtual together and being able to bring people together in this moment of isolation is very, very important, I think. And I think it seems to be working relatively well. If not, you know, using technology can definitely help. And we'll come to this talk about sort of technology in a minute as well. I want to turn my attention a little bit to Imam as well, and ask him sort of his experience so far. Am I correct to assume that you're based in New York right now, as well as seeing as you're teaching there?
I'm currently in Washington, D.C., but still based in New York.
Okay, so the West Coast.
Good.
And I can't hear yourself too clearly.
Is it better now?
That's much better.
Okay. Yeah.
And can you tell us a bit more about the experience in Washington so far as well, in terms of Ramadan, and a bit more about sort of, you know, what's really going on as well, so we can get the essence.
I mean, of course, last year was somewhat traumatic, especially for those of us. I live in Brooklyn, in New York City. And my wife and I actually became very ill early on in March, before anyone really knew, you know, what was going on. And then we started seeing, you know, bodies in parks, in morgues, you know, makeshift morgues and triad hospitals in Central Park. So I think there's still, and the Muslim community, especially in New York City, was hit perhaps more so than others, because Muslims, we tend to live in large families. And so you have relatives, and people couldn't just suddenly stop working. Yeah. And then now in DC, you know, there's still trepidation, right? There's still some fear of people losing, especially a lot of us, like I have older family members in my home. So young folks maybe not worried about getting sick. So coming into Ramadan this year was a lot of worry, but now masajid have started to open, alhamdulillah, and people are going back to masajid for Taraweeh. And you feel like, you know, people are just happy, right? There's a sense of, you know, you don't realize what you love until it's gone, is the great adage, right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ar-rajul qalbuhu muta'alliqun bil masjid," that a person that will be under the shade of Allah is a person whose heart is attached to the masjid. So I think for a lot of us, it's just like, wow, finally, you know, back in the masajid, around the community, having iftars. And of course, the Turkish center is down the street, the huge Turkish mosque ran by the Turkish government. They have iftars every night in PG County. So it's nice, man. It's good. It's good to be back.
I'm glad to hear that as well. And the situation in the UK is definitely better from where it was before, in the sense that now in my local mosque in Reading, we have socially distanced spots basically in the mosque, and we're lucky because we've got a big space. So, you know, you can have the 2 meter distance between one another. You bring your own prayer mat. You have to wear a mask, and you bring a bag to keep your shoes with you as well. So just eliminate all those the main points of contact with people. And I think already, like you said, compared to what it was last year, when there was no tarawih, there was no interactions at all allowed. You can't even leave your house, to where we are now. It's a really good reflective period of how far everyone has come, not just for sort of Muslims, but just also, humanity as well. Let's take this towards the technology side of things, because I'm quite keen to understand a bit more as well. Let me unmute Riyadh. And I wanted to sort of talk more about sort of, your work that you've done, not only sort of AJ Plus, but also in the sense that the importance of technology in all of this as well, and a bit of reflection of, where we were before to where we've come to now as well, embedded by sort of technology such as Zoom, but everything else.
So before I talk about it, I could just maybe touch on something that you said about, how far we've come in terms of from last year. I think the fact that you in the UK and Imam Said in the US are feeling that way, but people in the rest of the world are feeling different, also shows the disparity in terms of access for the majority of the world when it comes to vaccines. And I think the vaccines have enabled a lot of that for people in the West, living in Western countries, versus the rest of the world who are still trying to get enough access to be able to get vaccinated. And I think it's also important to remember that while things are opening up for some parts of the world, majority of the world just don't have access to vaccines, while some countries are hoarding vaccines, for example. And you look what's happening in India and elsewhere, it's just, there's a lot more that's going on. And I think maybe just to also locate ourselves back into that, the greater awareness, and for those who are able to get back into the masjids, to still be able to pray and remember to make prayers for those around the world who are still under lockdown in different spaces in that way. So just to come back to answer your question, obviously technology has changed a lot. And I think COVID has, fast-tracked a lot of the adoption of digital platforms and digital technology, where previously it was still, you had people who would be a bit more resistant in, can we work from home, for example, just the ability to work from home. Most companies were very hesitant to do that. And I think, the last year has shown that it's completely feasible to work from home. And it seems like most companies are trying to adapt to a hybrid model in whatever we call the new normal, with a few people, a few days in the office, a few days working at home, and being more flexible in terms of how we can adapt to this new world that we're going to be in. And technology, it's, I work in technology, I work in media, and I have a love-hate relationship with it. So as much as I love technology and the ability for us to be able to connect around the world and to be able to tell stories and get into different spaces, we're also in the age where there's so much information that's being shared, and sometimes it adds a lot of noise to our life. And I think for myself personally, and it's sort of a personal reflection, I try to take a lot of time outside of my workspace to actually try to disconnect, or get out of those thousands of WhatsApp groups that are there, to try and curate my digital life to see how I can actually engage with spaces that I'm able to benefit from, and mutually beneficial in that space. And I think that the challenge we have now is there's just so much availability. So even as we have in the session on, the Ramadan project, there are 3 or 4 other talks taking place on Zoom right now, and people just have to, what can I go to? And we're trying to grab into different sort of spaces. And I think once in a while, it might be good for us just to kind of put the brakes on and maybe just catch our breath. And I think also just to reflect, and, we don't always have to be in a rush to always be connected and be hyper connected all the time, that we can take a step out of that and just kind of recalibrate a bit internally. And for me, Ramadan is a good month to be able to do that, just to be able to take that step back and reflect a bit more with where we are. And as we move forward, into this new normal, obviously everything will be a lot more connected. Just important to remember that, yes, technology is there and it's our friend, and it makes the world, can make the world a better place. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. And we need to play our parts in this sort of digital world of how we can add value to society and use these platforms to, drive conversations forward, not just creating awareness about problems that are out there. And I mean, one thing I'm very passionate about is not using these platforms to be reactive to the news, but to be proactive. How can we tell our stories in a positive way? How can we showcase the beauty of Islam and our religion in a positive way on the digital platforms? That's something that I think sitting for me, at least in terms of my reflections for the last year, and how technology can facilitate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot happening around this now as well, and it might be off topic, but I mean, even sort of sports and sports clubs are looking at social media and the effects of it, the negative effects of it in terms of racism and boycotting and that sort of stuff as well, because it's more and more integrated within our lives now, to be able to think about, well, okay, technology is here to stay, and therefore, how can we best leverage this, not only just to elevate ourselves in our daily lives, but also, reduce the noise coming down from it as well. Just to add, I mean, I've sort of tried to do in terms of fasting in Ramadan, yes, you typically don't eat, but social fast is something I'm looking at right now as well. How can I ensure that I am stopping myself slowly to get off social media a little bit and actually have a bit more headspace, I suppose, and I guess feel better. So let's come back to that in a bit more detail as well. There is more questions coming in. So actually, let's go to the question right now. I'm going to bring in Hawazin, who has a question. Sorry, Hawazin, to put you on the spot.
Assalamu alaikum. No problem at all. Thank you very much, all our speakers for coming, for joining us from all over the place. Barakallahu fikum. Thank you so much. So my question is, do you think things actually, speaking about the representation of Muslims in the media, do you think compared to what was done before, do we have like a kind of small progression on this level, or do you think we still need to do effort? We still need to invest on the representation of Muslims in the media and how we want to master it. We don't want someone else to tell us like, this is how you are actually, and we are not like this. So what do you think about that, Riyad, or even the Imam?
Let's go to Imam Suhaib first.
Don't you think we should go to the media expert? I mean, he's
I'm
his
keen to
specialty is
spread the
media.
love a little bit.
He's the founder of. I mean, I'm not. My specialty is Sharia and Qira'at, so I would certainly defer to.
Sure. In that case, let's go to Riyad.
I mean, I can counter that, Imam Saib, to say that you're probably the one Imam with sort of the best engagement on social media and the way you approached it over the last few years. And it's something I think that's a good example in terms of representation and how to use these platforms to have a voice that's out there in a way. To answer the question, I think there's a lot of work we still need to do in terms of representation. We're very far away from that. And I think, at TRT, we produced a show called Ejderul. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Some of you might have heard of it. It's been watched the last 12 months by about 5 billion people on YouTube, or 5 billion views on YouTube. So it's gone incredibly viral. But the one thing that we've seen from that is that it's sort of the first show that shows heroes that are rooted in faith, so that they don't shy away from being Muslim. Your heroes are getting there. Ejderul gets his advice from Ibn Arabi, for example, that comes to him, and there's the hadith, and they go and pray their salah and the prayers that go there. So they're not trying to change their identity to mold within a specific norm that we see in other shows. There's a thing that I just saw yesterday, which was really disappointing. It's a new Netflix show, and I think the scene was the lady was breaking her fast with a tequila shot and said, Bismillah, I'm taking a tequila shot. Those sort of things, that representation just for the sake of representation doesn't work. And what we've seen a lot of the time with a lot of sort of the Hollywood productions that are trying to be more inclusive with representation, there's no space for people who are or would be termed conservative in a way. There's a liberalized version of the faith that may exist within the space, and maybe that's there. But for people who are not in that space and are still, adhere to the tenets of Islam, there's a very big lack of representation in that space. And for me, that's the biggest challenge to get into. And, a show like Rami did amazing in terms of, breaking down barriers in terms of getting into that space. But again, it is very much within a specific space. And there's this whole other part of the Muslim world that does exist that's still not yet represented, and is still seen as taboo in a way. If you go and pray your salah at work, or if you take your, if you go to your bottle to go take your istinja, it's still sort of the jokes that people have in the space, that it comes in those sort of specific ways. So I think there's a lot more that we need to be able to do in how we actually take representation that can be authentic, that can be representative of people who are and adhere to our faith in all its tenets that may be there. And I mean, the challenge we have is it goes all the way from script writers. Everyone these days who I talk about wants to get into media. Everyone wants to get into news. How can we be a journalist? How can we get into the space? And that's within the Muslim space. I think a lot of that is also being reactive to the news that's out there, where we see Islamophobia happening in France, and we want to be engaged in that story, and we want to always get stuck into that. But we're not taking a step back and saying, how can we actually address the stereotypes that have been existing within Hollywood, within other spaces, and how can we create media that's not just for Muslims? And I think Ejderul is a show that we've seen that non-Muslims around the world have watched it and been able to connect to it, because the messaging and the values are universal, and universal as it comes to love, as it comes to justice, as it comes to equality within the space. So these are themes I think that we could weave into spaces and narratives that I think critically important. And I mean, to anyone watching this, I would really encourage people to go out and become scriptwriters, learn to become producers, learn to become filmmakers, because this is a need that exists right now. And there is a demand and an audience that's there to watch it and needs to be served for sure. But we just don't have enough people coming through at this point to be able to serve that need.
Wow. I mean, I feel as Zoom says, maybe being a bit more unapologetic in this case as well.
And I think even hearing what Della has to say, we have the famous Della Miles here, right? So as a woman and as a Black woman in America, and now as a Muslim woman, I'm sure she can talk a lot about how you don't lose yourself to trying to make, especially the entertainment business, happy, right? And that's something that I worry about. Muslims are worried about constantly how to get along with others who aren't worried about getting along with us, right? And I mean, I understand the need to negotiate the earth, but not at the expense of the heavens. And that's what I love about what Riyadh said, right? Like, okay, we can tell women not to shake people's hands, but there's a clear hadith that says don't, right? And I was listening to Ambassador Rasul's talk, and I appreciate him. But at the same time, where do we draw a line on this is haram, right? And this is who we are, and let the light of the obedience of Allah shine into people's lives. And I would love to hear from Della as a woman, a Black woman from Houston, who negotiated and navigated the entertainment industry before Me Too existed, right? Before people were woke, and maintained her dignity. That's one of the things I've always loved about you, Della. You know, I'm a silent fan, is her ability to maintain her integrity, right?
Yeah,
no sellout, as Chuck D used to say, no sellout. So I do worry that, and I appreciate what Riyadh said, like with Rami, there are things, Rami has a sexual relationship with a woman he meets at a mosque. The neoliberal agenda to create a culture of heathenry. And I vote progressive left, but my concern is that there is an attempt to amplify the voice of heathenry among a woman having her iftar with tequila. I mean, this is kufr, it's disbelief, right? I mean, that's clear disbelief. So I would want to hear from Della on how do we not sell it also to people who like us or act like they like us?
Well, yes, you know what? I have to say that in my life, because my mother was a very strong Christian, and my mother instilled so many principles in her 6 children. And one thing she taught us was to stay in your lane. And you don't have to do as the Joneses do. If you believe something, whatever it is, stay in your lane. Don't let someone stop you from where you are going and what you are heading towards. And I have taken this with me even through my career. When I was working with Whitney Houston, and you can imagine some of the things that I've seen and some of the things that's been offered to me and some of the parties and all these things. But I tell you, I raised my right hand to Allah. I did my job. And after the concert, I went to my hotel room by myself. I did, because my mom taught me, if you're not there and something happens, no one can say Della was there. Stay in your lane. If you're not there, you're not there. And I made that a routine. So eventually, after so many years, everybody would say, oh, well, you know, Della not coming. Because that was my routine. They knew my focus was not to party, not to drink, not to do drugs. So they even stopped offering it to me because my light was different. And so that's all I can say. I thank my mother for these principles because she taught me to stay in my lane.
And can I add one more thing? Sorry.
Yes.
And I really, because Riyadh really got me motivated. It's Riyadh's fault. But Jay-Z has a great line where he says, either you own or being owned. And that's one of the things I appreciate about AJ Plus I was in the Bay Area. I don't know if I was there when you were there. It's just the independence of the voice, and that and again, we are surrounded by conservatives who want to physically destroy us and liberals who want to spiritually and dogmatically destroy us. I mean, we're in a very difficult position in the world. So that's why it's important to fund the efforts of independent voices in our community, artists, filmmakers, people that are in media, because that is really the voice of our community, are these people. So being owned or owning, I think, is something to think about as well.
It's a really good point.
Yes.
Really good point. And I mean, I want to ask more about this, Della Miles, as well, more about, staying true to who you are, and having your mum there as well to be able to tell you, stay in your lane, for example, and stay true to who you are. If for example, someone is also entering this industry and, they're going to be subject to all of these issues and what's the word I'm looking for? But influence, I suppose. How can they stay true to who they are without having, someone supportive at the top or someone around them as well? How can they really just hold that tight to them and sort of?
There's no easy answer to this question. It's really going to be a personal choice, and how strong is the foundation of that artist. And I always say to young artists, know who you are before you start. Mm-hmm. If you believe in who you are and you believe in your talent and what you have to offer, you will never have to sacrifice yourself. And if that one door closes, believe me, another one will open because of who you are. But if you sacrifice and you give in to anything that they're offering you, that door still will close with you in it.
Wow.
That's pretty profound, actually. And the reason why I ask is because that could be the reason why people don't go into media, for example. That could be the reason why we're not seeing enough development in that area. And so there needs to be some sort of influence to be able to say, well, actually, look, like we can create an avenue for people that have the boundaries in place as well, to say it's a safe area, it's a safe place to be able to go and join media, for example, as well. Which actually takes me to something you're doing at the moment as well. I believe it's the Della Kids Club.
That came to me during the first lockdown. I was in Dubai with my son, and my son goes to school there. And so I actually went to get him to bring him to Turkey because they started online schooling. And so as soon as I landed, all the borders closed. So I ended up staying in Dubai for 2 to 3 months. And I was going crazy. I was like, what am I going to do? And so my son and I decided, let's teach the kids. Let's teach English. Let's give them something. You have time? Let's do it. And so that's where the Kids Club came from.
And how's that going so far as well? I mean, what have you seen through the development of teaching online? You mentioned about having that influence and having that, positive mindset.
I received a lot of positive feedbacks, and the best feedback you can ever get is from a child. And when they write me and they send me videos with them singing along with the YouTube video channel, it is just the most rewarding. I mean, my heart is just flowing with gratitude, really.
That's really, really cool to hear. And I want to be able to see some of this some work as well. But I think the influence in sort of, pushing, motivating, and adding knowledge and value to not only kids, but also, everyone else during this Ramadan is quite important from many angles. And that sort of is another question that's come in around. We're in the last 10 days of Ramadan now, and it's the most important section. The whole thing's important, but people tend to focus on the last 10 days. And so starting with Imam Suhaib, the last 10 days, how do we make the most of it? It's a big question.
Yeah, there's really it's like you're hitting us with a lot of different serious inquiries here.
So
actually there's 3 things that really the scholarly tradition gives us to think about in the last 10 days. Number 1 is we should be extra studious in observing the obligations. right? So we should look to what triggers. So in the last 10 days, not only do we want to just simply perform the obligations, we want to start creating triggers that allow us, once we're out of Ramadan, to continue those obligations, right? So what triggers good? Not just the good. How can I furnish my heart in a way that good becomes easy? The second thing is we want to do the opposite with evil. So luckily we're fasting. And in some ways, this is one of the few benefits of COVID-19 is, that we are now able to distance ourselves from certain types of evil that are really like societal evil, right? You can only do it in a group of people. Even Hajar, the great 9th century scholar, he lost 3 daughters to the bubonic plague. And he actually wrote a book about plagues. And he says one of the virtues of all this was like, I'd stay at the house. I couldn't go out. I had no choice but to be good, right? So now putting in triggers that distance me from evil. And then the third is what's called iqtisaru bidururiyat min al-mubahat, that we start to restrict ourselves even in the areas of the permissible. So, Imam Shafi has a great statement. He says, you'll never truly become righteous until not only do you distance yourself from the forbidden, but also from certain components of the permissible, fearing that you may fall into the forbidden. So like the last 10 days, we want to think about that as an attitude. And then, of course, increasing our prayers and our du'as, our supplications. These are the last 10 nights. We know that in one of these blessed nights is the Laylatul Qadr, So we just want to make sure we worship a little every night, right? So that we guarantee, hopefully, that we catch it. And then, of course, the altruistic component, the Prophet became much more generous with his time and with his wealth in these last 10 days.
Right. And it's an open question as well to Della Miles and Riyad Minty as well. Any thoughts from your sides?
I mean, for me, because this has, as I've even with COVID, I've said this has been, as sad as it is, it's in my life, it's been also very positive because I've got a chance to reflect on a lot of things about my family, about my son, and especially during Ramadan, being here alone, it's just a lot of reflection going on with me and a lot of questions. And actually, I would love to be in contact. Oh, forgive me for not being able to say your name, but my brother from New York, because I have so many questions and about Islam. And
absolutely.
So this time for me has just been a reflective time. And I've been trying to read, but as you know, some of it is very difficult to understand. And but it's also very calming to be in the nature and to see God's work again. I mean, he's an artist. When you see the mountains and the lakes, and you just go, Allah. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. So it's another reflection of his work. And so I'm just happy. That's all. I'm just happy. And I hope in the next 10 days, everything will come to an end. But at the end, it will be a new start for me. That's my idea.
And Imam Sahib, would you, I suppose the request was more for information there as well. I mean, you can separately probably send that across as well, but also if anyone else is interested for any good links or books to read or any recommendations, I think would definitely be valuable for our readers and listeners here as well, and for myself certainly as well. Riyad, was anything else you would like to add?
I can't add anything on top of what is already said. It's just really beautiful.
Beautiful.
I think, it's just I think just being able to pause and reflect and appreciate the beauty around us. I think if you're able to do that, I think that's what it is, right? And find the creator in the creation around us. So if you're able to find that, inshallah, I think we're in a good space.
Inshallah. So I'm just gonna quickly check how we're doing for time. So we have about 5 more minutes before we might have to conclude. I think for the last 5 minutes, Imam, if you're happy to give a dua for us to then go into Azan, I think that would be quite a good way to sort of go into the end. But before that, I'm quite keen to hear about sort of, let's talk about the reflections of Ramadan a little bit more as well, and what you've sort of felt like you've gained from this Ramadan itself. Who would like to go sort of first?
Well, I can go because my husband is actually in the hospital, and but the doctors are saying that by the end of Ramadan, inshallah, he will be home. But he was home. He was in the hospital from COVID, and so being here alone without him, it's been very traumatic for me. And it's, again, I can say, to reflect on his life and my son's life. And even in the midst of that, to see the goodness in all of this. And so still, it's a grateful time for me. And I'm very grateful just to be here and to have this time to reflect.
Beautiful, thank you. And Riyadh.
I think for me, it's been a good time to pause also and just take a step back from things and think about what's really important in life. You know, a lot of the time we spend time chasing work and fill out time with a lot of different spaces. But I think with COVID, it's just been a time to really prioritize a lot of things in my own life personally and kind of reconnect with things that really matter to me and to reconnect with myself in a way, because the type of work that I do with media, you're always dealing and engaging with a lot of space, a lot of impact, and a lot of voices from around the world coming to you and asking questions. And it's easy to get lost in those conversations and lose yourself in sort of these bigger conversations that people want to have. And I think this time for me, it's just been really good to take that pause, come back and reconnect with myself, my wife, my family. It's also the longest period in my life that I've not been able to see my parents. I haven't been able to travel home to South Africa to see them. Normally I would see them at least, even though I live abroad, try to see them twice a year, but not being able to see them. It's, you know, it takes a lot of toll when you speak to your mother and she's like, am I ever going to see you again or not? And that's also a privilege to be able to have that conversation with my mother, because there's so many people who aren't able to travel or have that luxury to be able to go and jump on a flight whenever they want to go. So it's always this, you know, you feel the sadness in some spaces, but there's always a connection back to realize that that sadness is coming from a place of such privilege compared to what's really happening in the world for so many people that's out there, which you're able then to turn that into thankfulness, and just kind of presence yourself in that moment to be truly grateful for everything that we have in our lives. So I think that's really been this Ramadan, maybe this last 12 months for me.
I think I'm very similar in that respect as well, where it wasn't until I sort of went away to Egypt and saw the culture over there a little bit more. Just before the lockdown sort of happened, I sort of got an experience out in Egypt to see really what is Ramadan like over there, how do people interact, what is the essence of brotherhood and connectivity there as well. It's a completely different feel from London from my perspective. And when you get that and you get that glimpse, you realize, you know, actually there's a lot of things to be grateful for sure. There's so many things that you can take for granted quite easily in London, for example, living here, but at the same time, there's so much more to strive to as well. And just a final question, I think, before we go into Imam's dua towards the end as well, but what are you hopeful for the next sort of year going forward as well? And anything sort of like, we want to leave on a light, optimistic note. And I think that'd be quite nice to hear your thoughts on that as well. So I'll come to Delilah first, and then Riyadh, and then what we'll do is we'll go into sort of final reflections from Imam Suhaib, and also a dua if you can conclude as well. Okay, so Delilah first, please.
Yes, I think it's quite simple. I hope for peace. I hope that the world can get through this pandemic, and that, as you say, we can see our families again and see even more of our friends and all the good in people that we took for granted. We have taken each other for granted so often, and now we don't see each other. And so my hope is that we can all come together again in a peaceful way. And that means politicians and everyone.
Thank you, Delilah.
Yes.
I hope that we learn something from this. I think that it's sometimes when we get back to normal, it's easy just to get back to a normal life as things were before. But the world has changed, and I think we've seen so many things and so many different phases of it that we've gone through in this last year. And I hope that we're able to take the lessons from this, really fully embrace it, and build a better world. I think there's so much that we can learn from this of how we should be in terms of giving, in terms of proactiveness, in terms of supporting our communities in times of crisis. And I hope that, inshallah, that we're able to take those lessons and really manifest it in our own lives, starting with ourselves first, with our families, with our communities, within the broader society in that space. Let's hope that we're able to learn.
That's a comment from Hawazin as well, spending more time with the family, and I think that's all the same for all of us here as well. So just quickly, we have a couple of minutes left, and we will go into a bit of a final reflection and also a dua from Imam Sahib. Before I do that as well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you, Delilah Miles, and also Riyadh Minty as well. Please do join us again. I hope that we can do this next year, inshallah. Hopefully it's live. And we would love to have you as guest speakers at the event also as well. And I'd love to be there as well to see this. We'll go into the final reflections with Imam Sahib now.
Jazakumullah khair. First of all, tashakkur them to everybody. Alhamdulillah. And Riyadh, it's always nice and invigorating to hear you and see how things. I actually was wanting to hear how you struggle to maintain covering Muslims in Ramadan in an authentic way, because that's obviously a battle for us, at least here in the US. And then Della is, just invigorating, powerful story. And Adnan, thank you for being, it's never easy being a moderator, especially when the camera's on your face. It's even more difficult. And for all of the people who attended here at the RTP, it's an incredible project, incredible effort to bring people together. As the Prophet said, "It'amu ta'am," feed people, right? It's one of his most important statements, that Islam is to feed people. So personally, I just think that Ramadan is a reminder of our own mortality. We start after Fajr very strong, and by midday, you start to feel like what it's like to hit your 40s. And then after Asr, that's what it's like to start, being ready for Medicare. And then you break your fast, and that reminds you of Jannah. So every day actually of Ramadan is a encapsulation of our life cycle, and it centers us on our own mortality. And it reminds us that, what am I living for? And I don't necessarily have to live for consumption, right? By reducing consumption, I actually find the energy to live and pay attention to greater things. I see things I didn't see before because my stomach isn't clouding my vision. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by all of his names and attributes, to bless the great work that Ramadan 10 Project is doing and continues to do. We pray for Della's husband. My wife also had COVID, so I've been in this position before. We ask Allah to cure him, to make his sickness a means of his forgiveness, and to bring him home to you as the best Eid gift that anyone could have, be with their spouse. And we pray for Riyadh, who our media brothers and sisters are really under tremendous pressure, whether it's from the Zionists, whether it is from the neocons, whether again from the neoliberal agenda. Maintaining a true authentic voice within media is really, it's about not having a job, honestly, right? If you really want to maintain certain positions, then you become an independent journalist. So Riyadh, we ask Allah to bless you, to strengthen you, to continue this great work. Adnan, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise you, bless your family. This consistency of being able to pull off this project is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and يتقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا ويزكي أنفسنا ويثبت أقدامنا وينصرنا على أعدائنا ويثبت الإيمان في قلوبنا وأكرمنا بالتقوى والحلم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا آمين.
Thank you not only to yourself, Imam Sahib, but also all the guest speakers that will join us today. Della Miles, Riyadh Minty, it's been an absolute pleasure from my side and from our Ramadan 10 Project as well. the final thanks I want to be able to give as well is everyone that's joined us on social media today, everyone that's behind the scenes that we don't get to see, that has put a lot of work over here as well. And also our media partners, Islam Channel and Art Council UK. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to do this as well. We are, I think, now just about to go into the Azan, so I'm going to quickly pause over here for a quick reflection period whilst we play the Azan in a couple of seconds' time. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, so much.
إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة